Oops. Good evening. Welcome to the school committee. A few minutes late. Sorry about that. 7:30. What is that? 8?
It is.
Let's start with the approval of minutes. Regular session of May 13th, 2013. The last time we met. Dennis, nice job on the minutes and your inaugural effort.
Excellent job.
Can I have a motion to approve the minutes, please?
I'd so move.
Second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Question, comment? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Student communications, I don't see our student. Okay. Any other communications?
I did put a couple of items here in your packet. There are letters that are thank yous from the veterans groups in town regarding Memorial Day observances, and these particular letters are about a very nice ceremony at Foster, which was the week before Memorial Day, and then at Plymouth River, and I think the Foster one actually was on the day after the long weekend, and so very nice letters from Dave Sargent on behalf of the veterans. I do want to introduce our new elementary assistant principals. Only one is here tonight, but her name is Laurie Jacobs, and Laurie is at South School, longtime teacher at South, and will be the assistant principal at South. And Jen Lowe, who's been at South and at Foster, will be at Foster School. And the other new assistant, Becky is actually on a medical leave at the moment, so she is not here tonight, but we'll find a time that you can also meet her. I did include copies of resumes for Becky and for Laurie in your packet, and so Mary, do you want to say some nice words about your new hire?
I would love to. I would first of all like to...
Mary, I'm sorry, I have to ask you to come up.
I knew that. Sorry.
Let us know, and everybody at home, who you are.
Yes, I'm Mary Eastwood. I'm the principal of South Elementary. And before I begin, I would first of all like to thank Jen Lowe, who's been an amazing assistant principal in 2 buildings. And I was very sad to lose her, but I know she's going to continue to do a fabulous job at Foster. And the silver lining to that cloud is that we gained Laurie Jacobs as an assistant principal. Laurie has a lot of experience in different places. It even includes a Native American reservation. She's been in education for 20 years, has wonderful organizational skills and excellent people skills, so I know she's going to be a fabulous addition to the administrative team, and she's been at South for 11 years. Thank you. I was going to say 10 years, but 11 years, so very well known around the South Village. So we're very pleased to welcome her aboard and wish Jen the best at Foster. We know they're going to be a great team. Thanks.
Thank you, Mary.
And with Becky being newly appointed at East, Melissa Smith, a person that we hired last year to do the shared role at Plymouth River and at East, will remain at Plymouth River. And we're happy both about Becky's appointment and the fact that Melissa will be at Plymouth River School. So we have one remaining administrative vacancy, and that is the middle school at assistant principal. And we've advertised for that. Applications are coming in, and so as soon as we have the timeline on that hiring, we'll make time for that person to meet with you as well.
Great. Well, congratulations and welcome to Laurie and to Becky. And just, I would mention, I happened to attend the Memorial Day celebration at PRS, and it was terrific. Really enjoyed that. I'm sure Foster was as well. So thanks for that, and very nice, kind words for them to share along. Did you want to mention also the master plan update?
Oh, yes. There is a letter in your packet, and it's from the planning board and the planning department. And actually, the first meeting, the kickoff meeting, is as we speak. It's tonight. And this is with the Metropolitan Area Committee. We've done lots of work with them before. It's an important committee, and I think to the extent that we are able to participate and attend some of the meetings, that will be important to do. So there are a couple of other meetings listed here, but I'm sure that we'll hear more about it. There's actually a meeting for building staff coming up this week as well, and we'll try to get to that and keep you posted on what the plans are. But the kickoff meeting is tonight, the same night as we were meeting.
Great. Okay, item 5, questions and comments. Anything from the audience, anything not on the agenda? No? Okay, move on to new business. Fundraising and budget planning updates for the Fields project and to act on next steps in the concession bid process. That sounds like a very brief and simple task. I assure you it will not be quite so simple and brief. So you have before you an updated budget which John put together, in the last 2 hours, right? We've had some fluid numbers.
It's updated with the last 2 hours.
We've had some fluid numbers, particularly with the fundraising effort. And we've gotten some additional monies in and pledges in, and the budget in front of you reflects those numbers. I will point out that it does reflect an anticipated pledge from a particular individual, which has not yet been confirmed, in the amount of $35,000. So, and that person is not, I can't disclose the name of that individual at the present time, but that's kind of a work in progress, and we'll have a further update on that as soon as possible. There was contact as recently as this afternoon with respect to that. So just this number includes that $35,000. But I would just from a general sense, to point out that $1,083,000 have been raised privately. And I think that's a tremendous, tremendous effort on behalf of all the folks who've been working on this. And, you know, I would personally like to thank everyone who has opened up their checkbooks and their wallets for this project. We certainly didn't anticipate having to raise this much money. I think we're thrilled that we've been able to, now that we realize that we've had to raise a little bit more than we had anticipated. And we're still not quite there yet, which is kind of the second part of our discussion. But John, if you wanted to, I don't know if you wanted to walk through some of the changes in the budget or highlight
Sure.
anything in particular?
Yep. There was a few changes in the budget from the last time, and the project management base, and we'll get into project management in the next agenda topic, has increased slightly based on the actual quote and a capitated rate that, you know, we'll get from the engineer that I'll be recommending. In addition, I've made some adjustments to the band cost based on the actual experience for the refinancing that we got and the bond issuance costs. One item I picked up an error in my spreadsheet. Unfortunately, it went the incorrect way on the bond issuance costs, hadn't been included to begin with, so that number is higher actually than it was in the last budget. But that's corrected now.
Yeah, and just a note on that, we met somewhat recently with Ted Alexiadis, who indicated that bonds had actually already been signed by the selectmen, short-term bonds, at an interest rate, I think, of 0.18.
Yeah, 0.18 for the band, and we
Yeah.
actually got our statement on what the costs were.
Right.
So, but the bond issuance costs in our discussion, he said they wouldn't be as high as I had in there. So I've made an adjustment to, as opposed to a 1%, 0.75% cost for the bond issuance cost.
Okay.
But unfortunately, as I said, I didn't have them in the initial calculation.
So on the numbers from the May 13th, the last one I think we got,
Yes.
I thought it shows the bond issuance there is 42,192, and now it's 31,644.
That's correct.
So the number, the 42,000 was in there, but it didn't,
Oh.
there was a formulaic
I see.
mistake,
So
so it
didn't add
didn't
in.
reflect in the
Right.
total.
Thank you.
So the whole 42 was missing. Now we know it's been reduced.
Got it.
Now the 31
Is in
is in there, but it now reflects a larger delta because we were missing the number
it.
because
Thank
of the mathematical error.
So in the funding category, there have been no changes from the last budget update. In the fundraising, as you see, you know, the total fundraising down at the bottom is now $1,083,000. And to date, we've actually collected $340,000 of those dollars. So leaving, a total fundraising of 10,883. So the total funding sources that we have available are 42,67,770, and we still have a funding balance of $434,175. So with that as the, and then down below, I just, areas of possible reductions for school committee actions might be the alternates 2 through 5. Alternate 1, which is the lights, is actually required for any of the fundraising dollars. And then there's a possibility of reducing the contingency somewhat. And there's also a possibility of rejecting the concession bids and rebidding those.
John, I don't see here that list of VE items that came in the email that I forwarded, said was for tonight.
Oh, I didn't get those printed out.
We're gonna need those.
Okay.
I have a set.
Yeah, if you wanna, that's the one that came through that I
That's the one
forwarded?
that you
Yeah,
forwarded.
we just need copies of this then for everybody. We have been speaking with Gail, before we jump ahead, just to mention this, we've been speaking with Gail about obviously looking at the concession and potential value engineering items. Dennis had some particular specific questions, which prompted Gail to take a hard look at all of the opportunities for value engineering. And this afternoon, after meeting this morning with the various engineers who worked on the design, they forwarded a comprehensive list of value engineering opportunities that we can look at this evening.
John, is the total base estimate total of 5,701,945, that's carrying the bid alternates 1 through 5?
Right now, that's carrying 1 through 5.
1 through
yes.
5.
Yes. Where you see 2 through 5,
And
it
what's
is
the number on,
54,000.
what's the value or the number on 2 through 5?
$54,000.
Got it.
It's in that other alternates line.
Yeah.
And so obviously, if we're taking a hard look at value engineering for the concession, that likely means that we'll be potentially rejecting the bids and going back up.
I have a question on the lights.
Yeah.
Does that include, like, the basis for the lights?
Yes.
As well as
Liza.
the
Everything,
lights as
yes.
well?
It
So-
includes the material and the installation.
So
And a
would there-
25-year warranty on all bulbs.
Okay, but if, just that, trying to get the field ready for the field hockey team, if that's the first priority, can we find money and wait to raise the money on just putting the light poles up and maybe doing parts of the lights over time?
Well, one of the letters, Liza, when the HSP presented the amount of money that they were collecting at town meeting, they did say that all the fundraising they were doing were contingent on the lights.
Lights first.
Lights
Oh,
first
okay.
would be the first initiative, so I'd be hesitant to
Okay.
change that structure.
Yeah, and I think it's important on that note to point out that the shortfall that we're facing is really,
See again? I get you.
if they want it, they can have it, absolutely. I think that the shortfall that we're facing is more related to infrastructure than really to amenities. It has nothing to do with the lights cost, it has nothing to do with any of those other things that we've all along been intending to privately fundraise for.
It's mainly related to the drainage and the parking,
That's right.
so.
And the fact that overall, the bids just came in high.
Right.
A lot has been made recently of the fact that, the costs are higher on this, much higher than were anticipated, and that's the case. I mean, you look at a perfect example, on the middle school, the bids were low, and we were heroes. The bids are high on this project, and we look like villains, but we really had absolutely nothing to do with the bids in either case, although we'll take the credit for the low bids in one case, and hope not to take the hit for the high bids in this instance, but it just is a factor that we're having to deal with and do the best that we can. With respect to that, obviously, there's a limit to the amount of public funding that we can use, so we're trying to make up that difference with private funds.
Just the good news is, I guess, that we didn't wait any longer to do the middle school, or the bids, because they were probably a lot higher too, right?
You never know. I mean, I don't know that the two really, I mean, it's an interesting point. I don't know that the two have anything to do with one another. I mean, obviously, very different types of bids and scales of projects. So I'm sorry, John, you were still talking about the budget. I don't know if there was anything that you wanted to.
Nope, I had finished the budget, and then we would, possible reductions or, the discussion for the concession would probably be appropriate, or, discussion about alternates 2 through 5. We do have to, I did have a kickoff meeting this Wednesday with RAD, and for the field projects, which I'm not sure if there's anybody on site today, but today was supposed to be the kickoff. And I do have to get their contract to them. And in terms of that contract, as I said at the meeting, I said, well, I know for sure that it's going to be the field and it's going to be alternate 1. I'm not so sure yet on alternates 2 through 5, because that's really pending school committee action. However, it would be good for them to have a signed contract so that they can, in fact, mobilize and do everything they can with a good conscience. So
But John, I was at that meeting, didn't they say that we could add them at some point?
Yes.
If the money appeared?
Yes, we could add them. We
Donor
the
came
initial
forward.
contract, we could just, say in the initial contract, it will just be the base bid plus the alternate 1. But, they know that we're still interested in alternates 2 through 5, so we could in fact add them in a change order after the fact.
Right. Okay.
And it would be good to, to buy them in the same order. Once you don't take them, they could turn out differently, but, we probably would want to buy them in the same order as we had them listed. On a change order basis, if we were to.
John, what's the status of the no ornamental fencing? What does that mean?
That meant that was the 6th alternative.
6th alternative.
And in this base budget, just because it was, higher than we had anticipated, I didn't include that because I didn't think, in my view, it's nice to have the ornamental fencing, but it doesn't really pertain to the sports, the sports activities. That we need the scoreboards, the bullpens would be nice. Batting tunnels are useful for the teams, and foul poles would help mark the.
Is the ornamental fencing reflected in the 54,000?
No, there's none. So the ornamental fencing was another alternative, which would have made that 54 higher.
Okay.
I don't recall offhand exactly the amount of the ornamental fencing for RAD's bid.
So with respect to the contingency, which is $264,000, in terms of the middle school project and its contingency, I'm just curious, to what extent have we dipped into that? That seems like, to me, that seems like a big number for a relatively small project.
Yeah, the only reduction in the middle school contingency that we've made is related to the structural steel, and we only did that essentially when the structural steel was in the 90% completed range, because we felt comfortable that it was going to be completed, and I think it's now, except for some trim here and there, it's 99% completed. So we felt comfortable dropping, what was it, from 5% to 3%?
Was it 3 or 4?
In the
Yes.
contingency, I think to 3%.
3, okay.
And so this contingency fee also includes a contingency for the concession stand?
Yes, the
Which
concession,
is-
right.
Okay.
So that would
Which is a
drop,
low
if
bid
the
amount.
concession were rebid and was lower, that would drop.
That would change.
Hopefully, we don't experience a lot of change orders that add up to a lot of money, but
Right.
we have to carry
No,
something,
and I
yeah.
understand that. I'm just looking at historically, how much we dip into that, how much we hit that.
But a lot of that really has to do with the quality of the drawings and the engineering that goes into it.
Right.
That you don't get, there aren't any surprises. And I think what we had found at both East and I think what with AI3 in the past is that they are particularly well-known for having voluminous drawings and really doing an excellent job. Not that anybody else doesn't do a
Right.
good job, but, so I think that came through on East, and so far it's holding through on
the middle
HMS. So
school.
here we have a different, we're working with a different group, which
Right.
isn't, I'm not trying to knock anybody, but,
Sure.
but that is a function, can be a
Right.
function of the contingency.
And as you complete aspects of the project, do you change the contingency fee? Are the contingency set aside?
I think that, yeah, I think as we went along, we could reduce it. I mean, once the, I think once the, well, I'm not a construction expert, but once the ground is scraped and you know what's underneath it.
Right.
As they're building back up, okay, at that point, when they're building everything
Right.
back up, I wouldn't anticipate there'd be a whole lot of problems on the way back up. You know,
Once
it's
you
really,
open- once you
it's
open
really
the
what's
ground
under
up.
the
Okay.
ground is the primary issue
So let me ask
in
this.
this, and that could be within a month.
So if we were to rebid, right, and can we put in alternative items in the rebid, like alt items, like we did,
Into the concession?
into the concession? And obviously, if we rebid the project, then we'll be somewhat behind the field, the rebuilding of the field. So as we go along and we hit some milestone, would we be able to drop the contingency and then take one of those items that's on the bid alternative list and say, okay, now we have the money to put that in?
I think timing-wise, Carol, I think that if the decision were to reject all bids and to rebid,
Right.
there would be a design process, right, to redevelop design, and then it would take at least, 3-4 weeks to put it out to bid.
Right.
And then to open, then to evaluate the bid. So we're probably looking at a time frame anywhere between 6 and 8 weeks aggressively.
Right.
Which really, from this period of time, would put us at the end of July.
Mhm.
I think there'd be a lot more known
At
items
that
relative
point
to
in
this
time.
field project during that time. And I think, if things are going well, if things are coming as anticipated, I think we could in fact drop that and realize, hey, we don't need that amount of contingency.
Or we may have another donor that comes forward.
That's correct.
So it wouldn't preclude us, so if we put them in as bid alternatives, it might not preclude us from actually building the concession building that we actually,
Well, it
might
would in a
need.
way, because if you look at the list that is a suggested value engineering list, things like removing the second floor.
right?
And you can't kind of put that in after the fact.
But
So
you- but-
so there are a few items here that, yes, you could, but.
But what if you weren't actually building it until 8 weeks from now, and at that point, you had either additional money or additional contingency money?
Well,
That could be a
Yeah,
big design piece.
I mean, there's
When you
the
think
sch-
about that,
there's a
there's.
schedule on the back of here that we just passed out that shows, mobilization would start the 5th of August.
Right.
So, like you said, it's about 2 months where you'd have to let them know sometime before then.
Correct.
As
Right.
to I'm guessing what we'd want to do or what we didn't want to do. After that, I think Dot's absolutely right. That and several other things are going to be precluded once you actually start the.
Right, but I'm just wondering if it's a way to structure it, that it still gives us some time.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's possible or not, but I thought I'd ask the question.
No, I think it's a good question, and it gets you thinking, because I don't know if you design a building and then it's got to have a different roof on it. That's already designed, so I mean, is there a possibility, okay, hey, here's our base bid, but then maybe we want you to do
Right.
this, and how much would
Correct.
it be to do this?
so,
It's possible in a bid environment, you just have to structure it that way.
but down at the bottom of the sheet, so we have the total savings, if one were to take all of these value engineering, possible savings, is 149.5, but then there are some savings just based upon the timing of a bid. I mean, obviously, everybody wants their projects to start now. So, there looks as if there were some savings that, of course, will be eaten up by the cost of redesigning and rebidding, but at least that's a wash, it looks as if. Probably the biggest cost by rebidding is that we would have to relocate the electrical panel,
Right.
because we need that for the field construction project, and so that needs to happen. So that would be an additional cost, whereas the savings that might accrue to us because of timing would be eaten up in the cost of redesign and the bidding process itself. But it does look as if there's going to be a $25,000 to $30,000 cost
Mhm.
for the electrical panel. Is that the assumption the electrical panel would permanently be put
Well,
somewhere else?
I
or
think,
that we
I
move
think
it
they
back?
have to put that figure, there may be some less expensive alternative if we know we're going forward. I mean,
Yeah.
clearly we'd need a box if this concession is gonna be a long period of time. You know, if it's shorter, I mean, there's probably the potential of having the foundation, the pipes coming up and having a shed
Yeah,
there,
that's what I was thinking, yeah.
you know? But until we get to the whole timeframe and we know how the project will lay out, it's really, I think that's a precautionary number that we need to consider, that, you know, that would be the alternative for the time being.
Actually, the surprising thing to me is that if you look at all these things that add up to the 149.5, for the most part, they're smaller individual items. I had anticipated that eliminating the second story would be a very large savings, and it appears
Really not.
not to be.
I don't know.
And the other thing that's not reflected on here at all, besides dollars and really goes into the schedule, is so essentially if this were the schedule, it would lead to a 2-month delay from what we were anticipating. But this doesn't contemplate permitting. So I did confirm with the planning board that we would be required to go back to them with a minor modification of our design. And they even asked, you know, we could put you on for June 17th, are you ready? And of course, we don't have the redesign yet, we haven't even voted whether to do that. So obviously, it couldn't be on June 17th, it would likely be some weeks after that, presumably in July. So if you're looking at the schedule on the reverse, you know, obviously the plans, I mean, request for administrative change with planning board, so it is reflected here, that's the 28th. I mean, I was told the 17th was the first opportunity we could get on. I think that if we didn't have the 90% progress plans until the 28th, which is, you know, about 3+ weeks from now, then we wouldn't be able to be on the planning board agenda until at least a week or two after that.
Do they have a reduced schedule in the summer as well, in terms of
They
frequency?
might meet, like, because usually, they often will meet every week, but I imagine they don't do, in fact, I seem to recall that they sometimes don't meet much at all in the summertime.
Yeah, that's right.
I seem to remember someone telling me that about a 9-month schedule, speaking about a 9-month schedule. Whereas, you know, we meet less frequently in the summer, but still meet year-round. So that probably pushes this back a little bit, a couple more weeks at least, I would think. We weren't sure if it was going to require us to go to the planning board or maybe just a staff level, but it looks like we're going to have to go back in.
John, can you, or maybe Carol, can you explain on the remarks? So if, I'm looking at so VE6, and then the remark says, assumes VE5 is implemented, and then excludes VE3. So does that mean that you can do VE6 if you also do VE5, but then excludes VE3?
I don't know if that's 3 or 2.
Which-
It should be 2, I think that's a
Yeah, 'cause I was
mistake.
like, what does the countertop
Yeah,
have to
right.
do with
It doesn't. It's a mistake, it should be 2.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can do VE6 with, wait, let's see. You don't have to do 2 in order to do 6. Let's see. Or, so, to delete the 2, so to do VE8, delete the 2 restroom sinks. That's assuming that you're changing it's making it a seasonal building and, okay, seems,
Yeah, I'm not sure what
I think,
VE8 has anything to do with VE6, but,
well, it's not really 6, it's more 5, I think,
Oh.
because it becomes a seasonal building rather than a year-round.
right.
So you wouldn't have the water in there, whatever, I guess, for those sinks in that
You wouldn't
area?
need as many.
Right, oh, you wouldn't need as many.
Wouldn't need as many, no. Sinks aren't related to number of stalls. Oh, all right.
So this
So
wouldn't
with the way
give
it
you
was set up, this
access
is
to
the individuals. So when you have an
Oh.
individual, you'd need a sink there, so,
Oh,
you know,
I
as
got it.
opposed to,
All right.
you know.
So this
similar.
eliminates the access to
Okay.
an individual restroom.
That's correct.
So it's actually VE7.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I have to ask about that. I'm not sure, because
Because that would be
we
related
would still have the
to-
individual, I mean, individual restrooms are a separate item on here.
Right, but that's why it says assumes 5 to 6 is implemented.
Right,
So
but not
5
7.
Oh, yeah, wait,
really
it
means
is 7, yeah, you're right, yeah, it's 7, right.
Because 7 is a separate, and
That's right, yeah,
so I think that's a,
yeah, I think that's a typo.
So
It's
it probably
not
has
very
nothing to
much
do with 5 and
savings
6,
for-
but has to do with 7.
A lot of impact.
That's $10,000 for those two,
yeah.
but.
Yeah, it's really disappointing not to see a bigger
Yeah, I was expecting to
bigger
see.
savings.
Well, I was led to believe when we actually designed this, that the second floor was worth more, weren't you, Ed?
Worth more in what sense?
In value.
Oh, yeah.
Bill initially told me he thought it was about 100 grand.
So why is it
I
only
mean,
listed
certainly
as
more than
25?
50.
Because he said
Seeing
there was a whole, he said there was a whole
25,000.
truss system that he
Right.
was very
Exactly,
expensive.
for the roof, yep.
But actually, the design that we went with the gable end that gave us more storage was a less expensive truss system
Exactly.
than what it would have been with less storage, interestingly.
Okay, but I would imagine that, well, some of these estimated cost reductions are on the conservative side. I mean, until you actually rebid it, you really aren't going to know.
No, it's just that I anticipated
I-
having some big numbers.
Yeah.
Right.
And I got to tell you, I have
Around
absolutely no
the
faith in
roof.
these numbers anyway. I'm sorry, but I just don't.
I can't believe that you're eliminating the second story, and you're only getting $25,000
So
for
so
that.
it's-
That
it
just doesn't
se-
seem right to
It
me.
seems like there's two pieces here. One is, you know, and again, I'm working on the assumption, maybe it's an incorrect assumption, that we're going to need to rebid this building. So if we're going to rebid it, the question is, do we take something out?
Make
or
it
do we-
smaller?
Yeah, do we do something to make it different, or do we just say, okay, we're reducing the mandatory spec, if you will, and bidding these other things as alternates? You know, for instance, there are a couple things here that are strictly aesthetic.
Right.
You know, do you say, hey, look, if we're having trouble raising the money for it, do we take those aesthetic things out entirely? Or we just put them in as the last bid alternates and say, you know, if we raise the money, we'll put a couple in a weather vane on there, you know? Or do we just say, hey, look, this isn't a, you know, we don't need a couple in a weather vane on a concession building, even if we get, you know, if we have the money.
Well, Ed would argue that we shouldn't put a cupola anyway because they leak.
Yeah, yeah,
He's got literature,
yeah.
right?
I'm hearing that's coming off.
So, I mean, I don't know if you want, I mean, that's a good point. Some of the things are, you know, things that could come after the fact are separate from the actual structure, you know. I mean, I just went through and kind of prioritized what I would think about taking off, starting with the kitchen equipment at 10,000. Then going to the cupola and weather vane at another 10,000. Then going, and this is something I hate to do because we specifically made it this way because we were concerned about how it would look in the neighborhood. Because we got feedback that there were folks concerned about how this would look abutting a historic district. So VE6 is, you know, we designed this with cementatious clapboards and a shingle roof to make it look more like a house than a industrial or school building. And then I would say maybe VE5 would be next. I mean, that's something that Andy was a big proponent of, making it a year-round building, and I think we all agreed in the end that it made sense, particularly with respect to what we might store there, you know.
My last conversation with Margaret, when I asked her to contact her counterparts in other towns, The uniforms can be stored in a
Climate controlled.
non-climate controlled, but the balls, nobody does. No one was willing to, or able to give her an opinion, because they just don't do it.
Yeah.
So her sense is,
Makes sense.
she wouldn't be able to do it. Store the balls in an unheated space.
So where do we store the balls now?
Or we test with one ball, one winter, and
Yeah.
see how it goes.
But where do we store the balls now?
Don't
I'm
know.
assuming in the building.
Or store them in the
So
in the
why
high
couldn't we
school.
keep storing them in the building?
It's just, it's a little tight, but.
No, I understand,
it's
yeah.
More than little, it's very tight, but.
Yeah, but maybe there's
Yep.
things we can take out of the building and, you know,
And
that,
put-
that don't require.
Oh, you can put that as an ad alternate, too.
Sure.
Of the,
You know, Ray, it seems to me that even if you are aggressive with the value engineering, I think Dr. Gallo has hit the nail on the head. 149,500, make it 150,000, really is not making a dent into the shortfall of 434. It really isn't. It seems to me that, I don't think the way the concession building was designed is a bad design. It's just, it came in more than we expected it to come in, and in all honesty, there's a shortfall here. We need the concession building initially, well, for one reason, and really one reason only, and that's to be an electrical service area for the lights in the stadium and so on. Granted, there'll be electrical and plumbing run to the concession by way of conduits, but it seems to me that what we should be thinking about is biting the bullet, spending the 25 to 30,000 additional dollars, hate to do it, and come up with a location for the electrical panel relocation.
But we also
And
need the
not having a
building.
concession building at all?
We need the bathrooms.
We need the bathrooms.
We could have portable bathrooms.
Not with the
No,
bleachers.
no, we
Not
can't.
with the bleachers, Ed.
No.
The
Say again?
bleachers, the bleachers require the
Yeah.
toilets.
I don't think we can get a
Bleachers
certificate of
required.
occupancy with porta potties.
Now, you don't know that, and I believe that's been mentioned in the past. I mean, it's not the most desirable.
Well, I don't think, are you suggesting we would never build the concession building?
No, hardly,
Just-
not at
okay,
all.
no, I just wanna make
No,
sure.
not at all.
Okay.
But we're not gonna be able to come up with 434 with value engineering. So send it out for a rebid. You're not gonna have this, you're not gonna cover this short, we're not gonna cover this, I don't think we're gonna cover this shortfall.
So there's, you know, clearly, we need to do something, that we're required to have the restroom facilities there, and we believe we need some storage, okay? So, one possibility is, which is not on here, is, you know, can there be a smaller building,
Right.
okay? Another one is, you know, that, one of the things I had mentioned, although I don't see anything on here, was when we were at Marshfield, they had steel storage buildings. And when I drove by the high school the other day, back behind where the current concession building is now, there's this nice grassy patch back there that would probably fit 2 or 3 of these storage buildings, metal buildings, very nicely, if that would help us from a storage point of view. Now, I'd asked Gail to provide us a number for what those cost. What am I talking about? Because Liza wasn't there, I think, Carol, you were there. But it's basically it looked like about a 10-foot by 20-foot deep, maybe, unit that looks like if you've seen a shipping container, looks like a shipping container they drop in place in, you know, 1 or 2, in their case, they had 3 of them. They had 3 of them, of these metal things, right next to their $1 million concessions building, right next to the field. But I'm saying as a possibility, maybe, you know, back where the track is now behind the concession building, that area by the parking lot, could fit that, which might allow us to make a smaller building from a storage point of view. I don't know, but it's, you know, one more radical potential approach that might save us some significant money.
Well, I think we should look at perhaps making the building smaller. I think that, in addition to whatever we do with the building, we also, I would suggest, take out the alternative 2 through 5, which is $54,000. And I would consider reducing the contingency amount by maybe
50.
a percent, you know, it's about 53,000. So, you know, so then you're down to 334 and eliminating some things, perhaps making it smaller. Also, you're saying, John, we rebid, what's that process? How many weeks is that?
He's again sort of mapped out
It's in the
here,
back.
Carol, so, I mean.
General
with-
bids open on 23rd of July, but Ray's suggesting that it may be a week or two later than that, perhaps.
So,
Yeah, I mean, this could work, assuming we get on it right away.
So you have about you have about 2 months to
So you
see
have-
if we can raise some more
correct.
money. Right.
It buys us a little time.
Which I mean, you know, we've obviously raised a lot of money privately. A lot of folks have been working really hard.
We
And
can't-
I don't want to assume
No.
that we're going to be able to raise,
Or that we're
just
gonna-
because in 4 or 5 days, a group pulls in $100,000.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm not suggesting that that could happen again.
No, and not that we would ask the same group of people to,
Right. Some people have been working on nothing but this for months and months and months and need to focus on other things in their lives.
Yeah. So to your point, Carol, if the shortfall is 434 and you take the 54 out, so that takes it to 380, okay? And if we did all these things here,
you know,
That would take it-
and/or you reduce the contingency, you might
Right.
take it down to 330.
right? And then if you did all these things, that's 150, it takes it down to 180. So, you know, the question is, do we,
Well, you gotta add back in then.
right, the 30,000,
Yeah.
so say it's 200 for the sake of discussion.
But when you
Yeah.
actually rebid, just because they have valued
I
engineered
understand.
this, the bid could actually come in very different if you eliminate the second floor.
Yeah.
Maybe it isn't 25,000, maybe it's 50,000 or
Right.
75,000.
Maybe you'll get different bidders.
You may get different bidders.
Right.
Bidding the whole thing as a whole with a different design
Right.
could be a very different result than just kind of à la carte reductions.
Yeah,
So,
no, I'm just.
I think it's worth it's a path that we should consider.
Yeah.
Because if in the end it comes back and we don't have the money, then we're
Right.
back to Ed's suggestion of
Right.
doing something very different.
Does anyone know who the contact is for the football grant that we?
Right,
we
that's
thought
still
we
Yeah.
outstanding
hear
as
something
well.
about that in May.
I actually
We have not.
tried to reach out to them last week to find out when we would learn. There's a phone number and an email address, and I left a message and sent an email, and I haven't gotten a response yet. I thought it was going to be by the end of May as well. There's nothing on the website that indicates the timing. And the only thing I can do is call again and follow up. There's not much more information on the site about it, unfortunately.
So, John, if we were to reject all the bids, we don't need to sit here and redesign the building tonight, do we?
No, we don't.
Who's going to do that? We
The-
are going to do that with
the-
Gail?
Yeah.
Gail.
We have to provide some direction as to how.
Sure.
to-
I mean, I would suggest that
Your
maybe Ed,
subcommittee?
Andy, and I,
Right.
like we did before, pick up with
Correct.
Gail and go back to the drawing board on.
The answer I was looking
Yeah.
for.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, the only, my concern is that I would certainly love to see it come back, bid perhaps more competitively and come in lower or whatever, but I think we need to have a path, you know, or maybe more than one path to success. I'm reminded of the electoral stuff, not the politics side of it, but you know, what's the path to 271 votes or whatever it was? And, you know, we need to have a path, right now, the path that we're looking at takes us to still $200,000 deficit. Granted, there's lots of variables. I would like to have at least a path that says if, not necessarily a worst case, but if it came up and it's bid, you know, along the same lines and these numbers are close to correct, you know, how do we get to something that 6 weeks from now we say, okay, we've raised a little more money, but the bid still came in, and now we have something that gets us close to even. Or otherwise, we're not going to be bidding anything, and we're not going to be building anything this
Right.
fall, and it's going to be next spring before we do anything. If we
John?
don't come up with bids
You'd
next
also have the
time.
ground open at that point, though,
Yeah.
which, you know,
When
Yeah.
are we planning to sign the contract with RAD?
We have to do that I'd like to do it tomorrow.
Okay. just a question, and maybe we can make a phone call in the morning. Your impression, just looking at the number for the lights, 283, the Brady bid using the same
Vendor was 250.
vendor was 250.
Yep.
So, you know, I'd be interested in an explanation of that $33,000 delta.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a fair question to ask?
Sure. Yeah.
I think we should get that before we sign the contract.
I mean, another possibility, just in terms of the cost, is, if we did, as a change order, the foundation work, if we can do this, I don't know if we can do this or not, but could we have RAD pour the slab for this building, or not?
They're not a DCAM certified
Right.
contractor.
No,
I don't
right.
think, that's why they didn't build on this. They didn't bid on this.
Well, yeah,
So I don't know that they can.
Okay.
You have to have the certifications in
Okay.
order to do that kind of work, and I don't think they do.
all right.
Yeah, they didn't bid on the concession at all because they're not a DCAM certified
Right.
contractor.
Because I was just thinking in terms of the electrical service.
Remember, the whole discussion we had, they're a specialty athletic
Right,
field
exactly.
contractor.
Right.
So,
Okay.
Carol, can you come up here, please?
Because we want to make sure there's a video on YouTube of this.
I just wonder, I didn't, what is the total estimate of the concession stand right now before the value engineering?
Sure. So Carol Meyer of the Journal asking, well, the number we've been carrying in the budget is the low bid on the concession that we've gotten a recommendation from our engineer, which is $674,548. We've not accepted that bid, awarded that bid, or signed a contract with that contractor, but that's the number we've been carrying because it's the low bid and it's the one that our engineer has recommended we accept.
So in terms of process, is there anything, should any of us make a motion to reduce the shortfall at this point in time? Which I would be interested in doing, by making a motion to remove the alternatives
You're talking about on the field project?
on the field project of $54,000 as one motion,
Alternatives 2 through 5.
alternatives 2 through 5,
54.
Right.
54,000,
So
I'm
when we
sorry.
sign the contract, we would sign only for alternative number one.
That's correct.
Correct,
I would second that.
okay.
Any discussion on that? Those are the scoreboards for the baseball and softball fields, the bullpens, batting tunnel, and foul poles.
However, the scoreboard for the multipurpose field
there.
It's included.
separate, and it's
Right.
included in the basement.
Right. And these are, smaller items that I think, the electrical's gonna be there at whatever it is. It's just a matter of providing these things, and that could be done later on.
Well, and the fact is, those fields aren't going to be used for another year,
Right.
right?
That's exactly right.
Yes.
Because they would have to grow in anyway.
That's exactly right.
And I will say, I've had a conversation with a taxpayer in town who might be able to help us out on those,
Okay.
maybe.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Okay, now, can I make another motion?
Now we're going south. This is the right direction now.
I'd like to make a motion to reduce the contingency by 1%. And 1% is, I don't have my
Can we
calculator, like
calculate that?
52,000 something, I think, but
Well, it'd be less if the concession gets less.
it would. I mean, it would be, let's say 1%, because you're right, the concession, if it comes in at a different number, it will change. So I think probably saying 1%.
Well, actually, you're including the,
I am including the.
you're including the concession, no, John, you
in there.
include the concession in here for purposes of calculating that contingency, correct?
Yes.
Maybe we should
So,
take it out.
assuming we're going to
Rebid.
rebid, we
Right.
could take that concession number out of the total
And couldn't we put,
for now,
Right.
We could,
okay?
Yep.
So you're talking about
but what
four,
would we put in?
well,
Should be some estimate, probably,
And
if we're
what-
looking
well,
at the
add, I
entire
would,
project.
can we add the 4,283,000 and the 283 for the lights? And do the contingency based on that, those two
Carol?
amounts?
Yeah, 1% is 52,9
that's-
53,000. 52,945.
That's on the
That's on the
price.
total, though.
It's on the
Yeah,
total.
5 to 4.
So if you,
Well, let me suggest something along the same line, Carol. I'm not sure that we, the lights, and not that nothing can go wrong, but, but the lights is a pretty straightforward, in other words, do we
Yeah.
need to put in another $10,000 or $15,000 for light contingency?
What about carrying a contingency for the number that we carried for the concession in the cost estimate budget, the 550?
That sounds
So
reasonable.
55,000?
Yeah, 550,000. And then I think I sort of agree on the 283 as well.
I mean, the other thing is, could we carry a contingency on the actual concession building when that's awarded?
Yeah, it's still going to need to be in the.
Right, but we still want to know what we have
Oh,
for the
okay,
entire
sure. No, I see
project.
what you're saying.
So, for the sake of discussion, to make it perhaps easier, if we're going to reduce the contingency, I would suggest we just pick a number that we feel comfortable with. Again, like $200,000, to pick a number. In other words, to make it a percentage, all the percentages is a rule of thumb that says,
Right.
based upon these types of projects, and we can actually go to RAD on that, by the way, and ask them on their last X number of fields, what would the contingency end up being, or something like that. Might be one way to see if this number, which is roughly 5%, right?
Right.
And
Is a reasonable, is
the
high, low, whatever.
contingency doesn't include the project management
No.
costs.
No, it doesn't.
Right.
No,
So, given that, and it's a fair point,
it is.
but we can get the number first,
Yeah.
figure out the percentage, and then we can go around your way, right? And see if we like what it is? I don't know.
I have a question and a comment on this contingency. Are there requirements for the town and the bonding and how they plan on their contingency percentages for projects? Because is 5% pretty standard of what you plan for a contingency? I don't feel so comfortable making kind of arbitrary decisions about percentages of contingency to hold or not.
Yeah, I think 5% is reasonable for this type of project. And as we discussed earlier, I think that as we get into it, once the ground's scraped, I think we could even reduce it further.
Yeah, I would feel
If
more
there's a lot of-
comfortable of waiting
yeah.
until we
Yeah.
have better ideas of what the real costs are gonna be, because, we don't know those pipes in that drainage of, so I would be a little uncomfortable at this point, starting to reduce that contingency. I would be, it's fine if we're rebidding this building, and then that goes down, then the contingency automatically goes down because it's a percentage of the cost. But,
Yeah,
because it's a moving target anyway, if we're rebidding the concession building.
I guess the only point for my thinking would be, and for planning purposes, not necessarily for budgeting purposes, but for planning purposes, again, to get to that number that we're trying to reach that says we need a concession building that is $550,000 or $575 or, whatever that is, I think it's helpful to say, okay, that in a kind of not worst case, but in terms of a target, if we took the contingency for the sake of discussion to $200,000 and we looked at the other things there, we might end up with this bottom line being X, which says we could, quote unquote, afford a $500,000 building, given what we know today. Again, this is all, like you say, we're playing with balls in the air here, and
Because
there's
at the end
lots
of
of
the day, we
variables.
could not hit the contingency or only hit
Yeah.
it for a little bit, and then we've totally downscaled the building when we had the money to build the building we needed. And I know, it's a balancing act. So I guess it depends on what, the comfort level is.
Well, and just doing the numbers, so the 4,283, the 283 for the lights, carrying 55,000 for the concession.
550,000.
Five,
I'm sorry.
550.
Yes.
All you rebidders out there.
So it's down to 5,116, is that right?
make the contingency like 250 something.
Right, if the total were 5116, 1% of that, 51.
Again,
255.
I'm on record for when you're estimating a number to make it a round number, so
Right.
nobody's
I think
foolish
we're
enough to think
thinking
that it's, oh, it's $251,842.12, you know?
Okay, so takes it down 10,000.
Do you want to make that motion?
Okay. So I'm using the concession building amount that we were
Wait a minute.
planning on, which was 550 instead of the 674. And it's still including a 5% contingency.
Well, 50, I mean, 1% would be this. Right?
Yeah, 1% is 5160,
51.
right?
51
Fifty-
times 5.
So it would go down.
$50,160, is that what you get, Ray?
Right.
1%?
So that's what,
16
then
carry the one.
255?
No, 20 carry the one.
255,000?
Yeah, no, 51,160
So
is
it would be
1%.
214,567 would be what the contingency would be if you drop it by 5160.
Really?
Is that right?
But
Am I doing the math
4%,
right?
if you take 4%, really, roughly?
You make it
or-
4% instead of
Oh, I
5?
was still calling it 5%. We talking about 4%?
Oh, yeah, I was doing that math, because that's what you had suggested.
Right.
But you don't
No,
want to
no,
do that.
no, no,
That's
no,
fine.
no.
We're talking about keeping
Six.
5% on
Okay.
the
Yeah,
field
I'm
and
just-
the lights.
That would be
Right.
Go back to the
255.
drawing board and come up with a manageability.
Okay,
minute.
maybe, I'm sorry.
That's not what I
should probably
did.
calculate.
I guess
Okay, you
250.
did 4%.
Yep,
Okay.
yep.
Can anybody do 5%?
Action changes.
5% is 256,800, I think.
That sounds about right.
They-
Okay. So,
Zero.
keeping the 5% contingency, but dropping the value on the concession building, because we know the value of the building is going to drop, and we're just gonna use 550 as our original placeholder for that building. That would make the 5%
255.
contingency 256,
255,800.
255,800.
Okay.
Is that round enough for you, Dennis?
Yeah, I would have made it 255, but that's okay.
255,
But 255 is 8 is fine.
255,800.
9.
I would want like
Mhm.
254.
25.
Okay. So, that drops us about $9,000.
No, so the base estimate, if we, I understand now. So if we're looking at the base field bid is 4,283,000. The alternate one is 283. We're
Right.
saying the concession would be 550.
Correct.
Right? We're deleting the
54.
other alternatives. We're leaving project management in at 86,496, and we're changing the contingency to 255,800,
That's gonna be my motion.
Okay.
255,800.
right? And then the legal stays the same, the soft costs, the
Right.
bond issuance. What is that, what would that number be, the base estimated total?
So you're gonna
Well,
reduce it by 54?
that's a good question.
You're gonna
The base
reduce it
esti-
by 54?
Well, Dennis had mentioned too about the 283. Should we include the 5% on the 283? Maybe we should not, you know?
You know,
So it's gonna change it by, so it'll change it by
$14,000.
9,000, right, which is 150, well, 250. So it would change it by 124, 548. Plus 14 minus this. Around another $9,000. So it's about 133,000 reduced? About 133,000?
I think so.
All I'm looking is add up those numbers. So,
388, oh, wait a minute.
Well, that'd be more than that, John.
so you're saying that if we took the contingency based on the 4,283,000 plus the 550 only? I
Plus
don't know if
the
that's, if you feel comfortable with that, Carol, but, and not have a contingency on the light piece?
I'm fine, because I'm comfortable with going to 4%, so this would actually give us more money in the contingency.
Right.
So that would reduce the, so it'd be 14,165 reduction in the contingency for the light portion, 8927 reduction, I have to do it differently, because we've already taken that out. So 4280. 4283. So, does anybody else have 241, 650?
I've
For
got
the contingency.
241, 650.
For the contingency you're talking about now?
Contingency,
It's 5% of
5%.
the field and the new estimate for the concession building, but not the
Correct.
lights. Right.
That's what I have too. All right, that's my motion. My motion is to reduce the contingency to 241,650, which is a 5% contingency on the base field price, on a concession price of $550,000.
241 what?
241, 650.
I would second that.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion?
So the purpose of doing this is just to get an idea of where the difference we may be,
Yes.
of what we still have to raise money for.
Well, I think it's a little bit more than that.
It's
'cause
an
I-
exercise of just seeing where we are with these estimates.
Well, I think it's a little bit more than that because in doing this, we're assuming that the concession rebid is going to be a lower number. So it's a little bit
it's
more than
realistic
just,
that-
it's realistic. It's a little bit more than just seeing where we are. We're assuming that the number will be what we carried as a cost estimate in the budget.
In essence, what we just did is took out almost all of these value engineering numbers. If the bid
Right.
were to come in the same way it did.
Right,
By using that as the planning target.
right.
So before we vote on that, if we add up the 4,283, the 283, the 550, the 86,496, the 241, 650, and the legal soft cost and bond issuance, what would that come up with now?
5,238,670.
5,238,670?
I think so. Might want to check that.
Well,
No,
it's going to
too low
just
to me.
reduce
No,
that number.
the whole overall reduction is 77,077, so that's.
No, it's gotta be bigger than that.
77?
It's 124,000.
124,
I'm
548.
taking out the
54, and we've
54.
taken out
Plus 20,077.
Oh, I'm sorry, I
Right.
wasn't
In the
taking out the
concession.
concession.
So the total that we
Do it
have
the easy
out,
way, just add up those numbers. Don't worry about pluses and minuses if we have numbers.
so I get total reductions of 154,625. 128,548 plus
No, it's gotta be more than that.
20,077.
Nope,
It's got to be more than that.
Just add up the numbers we're at now.
More than 154,625?
4,283,000, 283, 550. It's easy, there's only 7 numbers there. I wish I brought my calculator.
241.
Need a smartphone, Dennis.
That's my wife, that's my wife.
So what are we trying, you're trying to get at the base number?
I just,
Right.
yeah,
It-
so
we're
it's
looking at
4,283,000,
I'm
283,
looking at the difference here.
Yeah, I'm looking at.
550,
625.
it's 86,496, 241, 650, 15, 9530, 31,644 equals.
Exactly.
4 minus this is 2. This is 3.
You got a smartphone, Liza, you can do that.
I know, but I hit the wrong number in there.
Seven.
I don't know, I don't need an adding machine tape.
I'm trying it myself.
Okay.
Oh, I'm with Liza, I'm having a hard time working my 4283.
4, 6. I get 5,647,320.
That couldn't be right.
No.
I
No.
got 5,500,000.
It's about $200,000.
320.
How do we get 200,000? If there's
Because we
124,
took-
548.
124,548 less
Plus
54.
4,000.
Oh, plus
you're
the
taking
54.
less.
Okay, you're right. Yeah,
If you're
okay, the
taking less.
54,000. That's
And
right.
then minus
Okay, I'm missing the
the
54,000.
difference on the
Yep.
contingency.
Right,
Right.
which is 23,100
Yeah.
and something.
20.
I'm sorry, I missed it.
23,077.
So it is, it's 208, right? So 625, yeah, 208, 625 is the reduction. No? So I go get my, let me go get my computer.
21635.
I got $5,500,320.
What did you get, 5?
$5,500,320.
That's right.
That's going to be pretty.
That's what I got.
Yeah, that's pretty close.
500, 320,
Mhm. Okay.
.01.
Which if you look at our total funding sources then, takes our shortfall to $233,000, give or take.
But the biggest chunk of that is, individually, is the assumption about the building coming in at
correct.
550.
Yes. But what this says is, if we find a bill, if we are able to build the building for 550, we're still short $230,000. So the question is, how comfortable are we that we can raise another $230,000 by, 6 weeks from now? Because if we don't feel some number north of 50% that we can do that, we need to look at how we can take another 100,000 or some number, like
Right.
another $100,000 out of that number somewhere. Now, part of that may come from contingency, and we'll know more about that, but I would doubt that we could take the contingency down to 150,
No, no, no.
$250,000.
Certainly,
Right,
no,
of
no.
course.
And I'm not advocating doing
No, I
that at this
understand.
time, at this
Right.
point in time, but I'm saying, once the ground is opened up,
Yeah,
and we are beyond
Yeah.
a certain point in
Right.
time, we probably might
Right.
feel differently about that.
But we need to have at least some mechanism for the money in place to sign the contract,
Correct.
even if it's, someone putting up something.
so now, in that regard,
There's two of us ended up with the same number, John, so we're going with that. Which is,
You should double check it.
which is,
And we're far apart, we couldn't cheat on it.
that's right, 5,500,320.01.
That's probably right, 125, 23.
Yeah,
and
because it's
54.
you reduce 124,548, 54,000, and 23,077, which is a total of 201,625.
Right.
You take that off of the 5,701,945.01, and you get 5,500,320.01.
okay. So now, going back to, we have the current low bidder at $675,000 for this, and we said 550, so that's $125,000 less. We've got $150,000 here, knowing that there's some additional cost for the bidding and whatever.
Right.
Okay, so the question is, if Ray and Ed and Andy are gonna work on getting us a building for $550,000 or less, are there things we wanna suggest to them as a committee that should come out of there? And, Ray started that, the cupola and the weather vane, or the cupola, whichever way you prefer,
That could just go.
right, can go, I would think. From my point of view, the E5 about winterizing the building is discretionary. I'm not saying I'd like to see it go, but, it's not gonna, it doesn't harm us from getting to where we wanna be, which is to have a field with bleachers and
Correct.
lights and all that kind of thing.
Is this all going to be in the same motion?
No, I
We
think,
have a motion on the
Yeah.
floor.
I know,
that
I'm
was
still
seconded.
I'm still
He's a
discussing
stream
it.
of consciousness right now, getting from A to B.
No, and the reason
So-
I think it's relevant to that motion is because I want to make sure that we've gotten to some place that we think can get us to where we want to get to. It doesn't, I mean, if
I'm
we,
just asking.
yeah.
So the motion is still on the floor,
Yes.
but now we're looking at the value engineering piece.
Do we want
If you want to vote on the motion, that's
Yeah,
fine.
let's do that.
Any further discussion on that? So,
So my motion was to reduce the contingency to 241,650, and I believe, Dennis, you seconded it?
Yes, I did.
And Carol, how was that calculated again? I'm sorry. I'm
It's the
just-
base field price,
Yep,
we're not including the light price in
Okay.
there.
Mhm.
And we're including a concession building of 550,000, and it's 5% of
Okay.
that amount,
all right,
of those two amounts.
okay.
any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay.
Okay.
So getting back to the concessions,
Okay,
Dennis.
so now, so, I mean, that would be, so VE1, I think we're just, we're pretty much agreed should come out.
Does anyone feel strongly about that one?
B1?
VE1 should come out anyway, right? You weren't crazy about the couple other units. That's what I heard.
So even if you were able to keep the second story in, the cupola can,
I think
Not
that's,
related.
I think that's fair.
Okay. And I'm suggesting that at the very least, as a bid alt, we would, taking the weatherization or making it a seasonal building is something should be an alternate.
Yeah, I don't think you can do it as an alternate because you either build it with insulation and, the ability
Right.
to have it be winterized or not.
Okay, so that's.
I don't think that's something you can do after the
Okay.
fact or later on or.
No, but you could accept it in the original bid.
Yeah,
You could, I think, John's more the
I think it
expert on
depends
this.
on the
but-
timing, but for 2 months, you could probably couldn't you keep it in there before the
Perhaps.
actual?
Well, I mean, I would ask the question.
could ask the question.
To me,
I would
well,
agree.
or beyond that, to me, I would take it out entirely. It were just up to me. If it's,
Dennis, if we sit here now
Mhm.
and go through and try to come up with a change from 674 to 550, there's not enough time in the night to do it.
Okay.
So should we
I would
do
respectfully suggest that
an additional meeting?
encourage and the subcommittee to sit down and come up with a $550,000 building to the best of their ability.
but it would be helpful to hear
Yeah.
anybody's other
Anybody feels
things
strongly about
Anything
must-haves
feels strongly about
versus-
must-haves in
Yeah.
this list of VE items that you
things.
would be very unhappy if they were to come out.
No, I would just say
You're unhappy.
that to the extent we could have a second floor for storage, that would be my number one
Right.
priority.
Yeah, I would agree.
I would
that
agree
the
with that as
storage
well.
is-
Yes.
It does, I mean, storage is needed,
It
whether
is.
it's a second
Right.
floor,
Right.
whatever,
Right.
yeah.
The rest of it,
So the other question would be, do we want to task them to look at a building that's smaller?
um,
And how that might work?
I think they know they need to
Yeah.
come up with a building that costs less money, so I'm gonna
Okay.
leave it to them to
Okay.
figure it out.
We made an awful lot of these separate toilet entrances in the permitting process. Told the community this would be a,
Right.
benefit
Yeah.
for children on the field and so on,
Yeah.
so.
Well, particularly since we value engineered that out of
Middle school?
the middle school. That was something that was initially in the design, a field toilet at the middle school for $150,000, and that came out. I think certainly at this location, since it's used by so many more,
Yeah.
for so many more events every day, I think that would be a mistake if we took out those
I would
available
agree.
bathrooms.
Okay.
Right, that was my key contribution to our design, right, Ed? Yours was the
Okay.
pavilion, I think.
So what's left?
All
So
right.
should we, do we have to
Well, the kitchen
reject?
equipment, and the gutters and downspouts.
Yeah, I don't know if we need to go through every
Yeah.
one here. I think if there's anything that,
Looking at
I think we
anything.
come to consensus that everyone would like to see storage in there to some degree, whether it's a second floor or some other space in the building.
Right.
I think we have consensus in, the cupola and weather vane can come out.
Mhm.
Maybe the schedule of kitchen equipment is kind of an afterthought and not something that needs to be in this bid. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
As long as the electrical service or whatever was necessary to
Right.
support it in the future.
Right. So, and I think the other things are part and parcel of the structure of the building, how it's put together, whether it's siding or
Yeah,
block
the
or
only-
whatever.
Right,
So
the
like-
only other part is the other aesthetic part, which is, we currently have a concession building there that's cinder block with a flat roof.
Mhm.
You know, would that, yeah, I think that's what it is, right?
Yeah, I was just thinking, it's
It's not
painted
flat.
red.
Yeah.
It's not, there's a little
like a
pitch on
hip?
the roof.
The hip?
It's a hip roof, yeah.
Okay, but, so if, but, to save $24,000 or whatever, is that something worth doing on the face of it? I would
Right.
say for something we're gonna live with for 30 years, that wouldn't
Yeah.
be my preference,
Well,
but.
and how much time do we spend looking at the hip versus the gable roof? Ed?
We could change the pitch of the roof,
Sure.
give it aesthetics, minimum storage, change it from a 12 to a 2 or 3 or 4.
We could go back to the hip
Yeah,
from the gable.
and save money, and you'd lose storage, but you'd still have a.
There still would
rather
be
than just a
some.
pitch roof that you have on the.
Yep.
Right.
yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
So do we have to now go back to the bids and?
yeah. Right,
So
so,
do we have to vote to not accept the bids that we got?
That's what we're-
Oh, sorry.
it's all right. So, the bids that we got, I think we can only, do we have to vote to reject all the bids? Because we
Yes.
haven't accepted any of them.
Yes.
Okay. Do we have to specifically mention the low bid, because that was the recommendation, or no?
No, I think you just would reject all
Okay.
bids, and,
So,
I
we
think
received 11.
due to
bid-
budgetary considerations,
We received 11 bids for the concession building construction. I would move that we vote to reject all 11 bids due to our inability to,
budgetary.
due to budgetary constraints
Mhm, yep.
and a desire to redesign and rebid.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Okay. Well, I think it's a very responsible thing that we just did. I think it will go a long way to showing folks who are paying attention to this that we're taking the cost of this project seriously and that we're doing everything we can to reduce the costs and control the costs. So I feel good about that.
And to enhance the possibility that we'll get it built sooner rather than
Correct.
later.
That's right. So if we can achieve both, that would be terrific. Okay. Six point two, project management. So John, as you know, looked into the possibility of engaging another professional besides Gail to engage in project management for this. We do have the comparison sheet based on proposals that John collected, one for Gail, one for Site Management Group, I believe the group that was involved in the Ward Street project, and for PAR Engineering, who happens to be the civil engineer on the middle school project and works with AI3 on a number of their projects, including Marshfield. John, did you want to speak to?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, so I had previously provided this analysis. When we look at the cost aspects, generally the rates are all within line of each other, and I think that this is more of a decision that we want to make for the type of firm that we want to actually be the owner's representative in the field. So I've done the evaluation, we're looking at Gale at Site Management Group, who came in, and I interviewed them, and I've also interviewed PAR. And we have a lot of experience with Gale, and, with their project management capabilities. PAR, we have some with the middle school, but I also had them come in with their engineer, the person that would be on site to, sort of evaluate their skills. I was really focused in the overall recommendation where I'm going to recommend PAR for this, and I'll get into the explanation as to why between Gale and PAR. Basically because of the experience level. Site management group, while very, good qualifications and stuff, they just haven't done a lot of field stuff. And I thought that firm, project manager with active in field stuff, field synthetic turf fields and the like would be a better fit, especially where the cost considerations are about the same. Actually, PAR in this evaluation is a little bit less, and that would be a capitated rate. So when we actually look at the base, Gale, as the engineer of record, owes us certain services based on the actual design contract and stuff, so they will be very active in this process as well. The owner's project manager, so Gale could certainly do that work too, but I think that it's a good idea to sort of, separate duties a little bit, so that you have your own representative. Gale could be our representative, but really, an OPM is directly responsible to the school, and they act in the school's interest. They would, at every stage, they would act in the school's discretion, and they'll deal with all the other factors that are out there in the field. I've always thought about this process similar to, if I could have our town engineer, Roger Fernandez, on site just about all the time, or more active in this project, that's really the services that we're sort of looking for. And this OPM can have, act in that capacity. They'll have an engineer on site. We actually had the engineer come in, and I had Roger here as well. A gentleman named Tom Perry, who is an engineer, but also has significant construction experience. And, him and Roger had a good talk, and I participated where I could as well. But the qualifications seem to be very strong. And, with the experience of the middle school, I think we know what their track record is. And then I also talked about him. He provided a very detailed schedule of the time that was necessary and, rated certain hours for different services, a managing engineer, regular on-site engineer. And as this project rolls out, we'll see how much time we need on-site. So, but they have, their rate would be capitated. The maximum it would be with $69,000 for their portion of project management for PAR. The other, as I said, the $16,590 from Gale is part of their base contract. So, with that, I would recommend that the committee, I recommend that the committee vote to establish PAR as the OPM for this project.
So, John, you said PAR's rates would be capped at 69, and then with, in addition, Gale's.
Yeah, so the total
Base.
OPM cost is that $86,496 for under PAR.
Okay.
And, yeah, so PAR, their hours, we'll do this on a weekly basis. This won't be a total cost
All right.
necessarily, but, as the project gets underway, we won't need an engineer out there all the time.
Okay.
But, based on the schedule, we will have an engineer there available whenever we need them. And, looking at that number of hours, they've sort of agreed that $69,000 would be plenty. Some of their tracking started already, but we haven't used them, so there will be some savings, but it's better to go to the higher just in case something were to develop.
So I'm interested that on PAR versus the other two, they are putting virtually almost all the hours on the senior project manager versus the other one's pretty much split between the senior project manager and the on-site engineer.
For sake of comparability, Dennis, I had to blend rates.
Okay.
I had to blend rates. I mean, because
Okay.
a managing engineer at 4 hours at $152 an hour and an
Okay.
engineer at 85, so,
So it's not really a difference in approach. It's-
No, it's not a difference in approach. Basically, any of these firms would do work similarly. They'll be on site, they'll make notations of what equipment's on site, what work is being performed. They'll make sure that, Gale will be doing the submittals and keeping logs and stuff like that, and they'll work with Gale and make sure all that happens. They'll take notes, they'll take pictures, they'll communicate with us, they'll provide reports so we know what's being done every day. They really act as you out in the field. They're your representative.
To go back to Liza's question, the Gale base, the 16,590 is in each of these
Yep.
three things, and that's where you get to the 86. So if you
Yeah.
go back to the budget page, the project management base is the 86,496.
Right.
But then if you go down to the funding section, and you see the 16,590
Yeah.
is coming off of that, and that's where you get that notion that the PAR money is actually capped. So in other words, the Gale, the 16,590 is coming out of the current funding
Right.
and the contract with Gale.
The design contract.
Oh,
It's an offset.
okay.
It's an offset, so it
So
effectively
we already-
reduces
So
the
you
number.
see the
numbers.
86 up above
Right.
as the total cost of project management, but 16,590 is being
okay.
paid for out of the current contract.
I thought it was that Gale still provides, so it's the
Well, they still
services
have
we
to-
already,
yeah.
we paid
We've
from
already paid-
previous
we've already
budget.
contracted
It
Okay.
was in their contract, and we've
Okay.
opted into that aspect of the contract because they need to be engineer of record.
Okay.
You know, I think that it's a good idea to have a second set of eyes that are looking at, in particular for our interests. I think we've had that experience in the other projects we've had, and it's
Worked well.
served us well.
Well, and I can tell you, the PAR has done a great job.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very happy working with them on the middle school. And it's Tom Perry
Tom Perry
Yeah.
and Andrew Shagnon.
was, and they were both involved in the middle school. So,
I mean, the other possibility is to offer $69,000 to Roger Fernandez and have him go on leave for 3 months. That probably is not a good option.
Well,
Would
Roger
put you
will,
in good
Roger,
stead.
by the way, no, Roger is part of this project team and has participated in the kickoff meetings, and, I mean, Rogers is involved and will provide any help that we can, but we can't really ask him, Roger, can you sit out there, for, 20 hours a week
You can
or
ask,
so
you just won't get it, right?
to monitor the thing.
All right,
They,
so
yeah, we all have jobs to do.
I'm going to make a motion that we follow John's recommendation to engage the services of, is it
PAR
PAR
Corporation.
Engineering or?
PAR Corporation.
PAR Corporation as a project manager for the high school fields project.
second.
Do we have to put the number in there?
You could put a capitated rate of
I would-
69.
I would like to just amend that to say,
Right.
at a fee capped at $69,000.
Not to exceed, yeah,
Not to exceed $69,000.
Thank you, Dennis.
Mm-hmm.
I'll second the amended motion. Any discussion?
Yes, I'd like to spend a few minutes. Anticipating that this subject was going to come up tonight, I've given this quite a bit of thought. This project that we're sitting here tonight, the most recent reincarnation was started about 3 years ago tonight, when Margaret sat down and spoke to the school committee, when Andy and Ray were newly minted and I was sitting in the audience. For the first 2 years of my school committee attendance and participation, this project has occupied my time, and a lot of people worked very, very hard on this project. Those of us who have been involved in it from the get-go were told many, many times when we started this incarnation, this isn't going to happen, it'll never happen, and here we are. I have personally had interfacing with the Gale principals on numerous occasions, too many to count over the past 2 years. And I think if Gale is in the running and is qualified, and as I look at it, more than competitive in terms of price, I would support Gale for this position.
Any other discussion or comments? We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 4-1. Okay. with the committee's indulgence, I'd like to skip ahead because we have Brenda Black and Janice McPhillips joining us again. And I don't want to make them wait
Any
through the
longer?
next discussion,
Hour.
which could go on. So if we could just skip ahead to 6.7. As you recall, when we last met on the 13th, we talked about a suggestion with respect to our recycling program and a grant that was available through the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection, a template of the application letter, I believe,
Yes.
was reviewed
tonight.
by, was sent to us and reviewed by the policy subcommittee. And I think there was some concern raised about the scope covered in that application letter when compared to the scope that was discussed in our meeting when Brenda and Janice were here last. So I thought maybe we'd revisit that, obviously, and
And the handout that you have this evening is what was submitted earlier today by Brenda. It's revised from the time that the policy committee discussed it, which was last Friday. It has been revised and certainly, in my mind, has addressed, the revision has addressed some of the things that I heard discussed at that policy meeting. We had two policy meetings last week. The first policy meeting, there was a motion, and it was a vote of 2 in favor and 1 abstention to support the grant application. And then by Friday, in fact, in time for you to have it in your packet on Thursday, we had a draft of the actual letter of commitment that we would be submitting. And that was what was reviewed at the meeting on Friday. And at that meeting, there was some consensus about some particular areas of concern, which are shared with Brenda. And based upon that information, what you have tonight has been revised from when we last saw it, or at least the policy committee last saw it on Friday afternoon.
looks to be the main change has to do with the organics, the second bullet point. Rather than committing to adopting a policy with respect to organic waste, this would design and implement a pilot organics collection program.
As well as, I think, the last sentence in the first paragraph.
Yeah.
Support the goals of the program and the town's recycling requirements. So I think that's
Yeah.
important as well to know.
The only thing that that came to me while I was reading the initial draft and then looking at this again is, after that last sentence, obviously, the grant would fund the initial coordination position, and then we'll provide continued support for the goals of the program. Just thinking about kind of the point that Andy has made in the past, what if funding isn't available?
Right.
To the extent funding is, kind of like the state legislature does, subject to appropriation.
Right. I think that as I've thought about this over the last week or so, it's become clearer in my mind that what this grant would allow us to do is hire someone to coordinate the efforts, to give us all some training in how we should carry on, to create some ideas for efficiencies and for help us with the training and getting set up and so on, as opposed to someone who's going to come and do the implementation and then potentially simply disappear, leaving us with no one to do the implementation. So I think if you think of this as a person who's coordinating and training and getting us ready to move forward, hopefully on our own, at least to a greater extent than we might have been able to do if we hadn't had this person, I think you perceive the role in a different way. So it wouldn't be as if we're hiring another custodian, for example, and have that person for a period of time, and all of a sudden the person goes away, and we're expected to do the same kinds of functions.
Right, and I think that the policy committee has actually met a second time after our initial recommendation, and I'm pleased to see that that we have, this new draft is responsive to our concerns, because our recommendation, to your point, Ray, and to Andy's point, if you were here, was really our understanding that this grant was going to be used to prepare us to comply with what were going to be future recycling requirements in the state. Might as well use this grant to put the infrastructure in place, the processes and so forth. And, so that was one thing. The other thing, that looking at the revised draft, the second set of bullets here that talks about, we agree to contribute our support and expertise to help the school recycling composting program succeed. Such support will include. I still have some concern that that's a little prescriptive, that it would seem to me that a more general statement that says, in support of what comes out of the policies and procedures and so forth that are developed, because I don't know right now that it's good, it would be good to have an expanding, I mean, I'm not saying it's bad, but that we would necessarily want to expand the existing Hingham Law School recycling, or that we want to establish a green committee, those things that are said here, so.
What if we change the word will to may?
Yeah, or, like I say, or,
Yeah.
Commit us to doing the things necessary to implement the plan or to follow through with the plan. But that was the other concern, I think, of our subcommittee.
I think to a certain extent, some of the language, though, may be addressing some
Specific.
specifics of the grant.
Okay.
I would imagine. So, I don't
So
know.
rather than will support, you're saying may include?
Yeah.
I-
Do you
how-
think that would
Could
be
include?
objectionable?
Or you could say could include,
What would you prefer, could or may?
May's
I think
Okay.
may is
Better.
stronger.
Okay.
could is
Yeah,
more of a
could is
question
more
mark.
wishy-washy.
Okay, may.
Yeah, it could be more.
Right.
Could be.
Right. Okay.
And you'll notice that there are a number of signatures, and Brenda has a plan, as only Brenda can do, with her very detailed plans for how we can get all these signatures in a very quick period of time. So we're not concerned about being able to manage that piece of it.
Notice the last block still says question mark. Is there a question as to whether there's more people that need to sign, or?
I think I actually probably had meant to have a question mark at the end of town administrator.
Okay.
Oh,
Who is the long-range waste planning and recycling? Oh, the two of you are?
Well, no, we now are officially here with the committee endorsement.
Okay.
This is something we just-
All right.
great.
So with the support, or the recommendation of the policy subcommittee and the revisions made to this draft application, I would entertain a motion.
I would move that we support the signing of this commitment letter for the Mass DEP's School Recycling Assistance Grant Program as amended.
I mentioned the funding aspect. Are we adding that language to the end of the first paragraph, or no?
The May?
No, you said.
No. At the end of the first paragraph, where I said to the extent funding is available, I mentioned that concept. It says, we will provide continued support for the goals, blah, 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 blah.
After the grant funding ends, subject to appropriation or subject to?
Subject to budgetary
To the extent funding is available.
constraints? Or, yeah, whichever.
May
May I ask what you?
Brenda, can you come up here? Thanks.
The task
think
that the person paid for by this grant would be completed by the end of the grant time. There is nothing that needs to be ongoingly funded. The two pieces of work that the school department would need to continue to do would be to have custodians continue to manage the waste stream,
Right.
and to have the business office continue to make appropriate contracts for hauling of waste.
Sure.
And that would be in
Which-
accordance, though, with the town's recycling requirements at the time the grant funding ends.
Right.
I mean, the only thing that I would suggest is, a few years ago, we were faced with having to eliminate positions. And if, for instance, we were to suffer budget setbacks in the coming years, and we had to reduce our custodial force, and as a result of reducing our custodial force, we had to then reduce the tasks that certain custodians did, and this became kind of a less important task, if you will, than cleaning the buildings or whatever it is. That's just something that, I'm not suggesting that could happen. I don't think the financial forecast would indicate that, but you never know what could happen. So I just, in my mind, I hate to promise continuing something. Yes, the initial setup of this, the grant will pay for that position, but there will be work that needs to be ongoing, that someone will have to do.
So Ray?
Managing the waste stream and contracting for hauling.
Right.
Yeah, so if you look at this, Ray, it says, "We will provide continued support." It doesn't say financial support. So I would suggest that, I don't envision a time that we would not want to continue to support the goals.
Goals of the
The
program.
goals of the program, right?
Or the town's recycling
Right.
And it really-
requirements.
Right,
if
yeah,
it's-
exactly.
If it's the law.
If it's the town's, right, recycling requirements, then we need to adhere to them.
Right.
And if it's not,
Right. Okay,
I think the language covers it.
fair enough.
Just with that one change that,
The may.
the will to may.
Second?
Second?
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you both.
Thank you very much. I know it's a big
That's great.
undertaking.
No good deed goes unpunished, you know that.
Yes, we meet
Heard that
Thursday.
song.
Thank you both for your time
Yes,
and
thank you
effort
so
on this
much.
and for coming back and sticking around.
I'm very excited
Appreciate
about it.
Oh, good.
We love being a model for the state. We seem to do that very well.
Okay, so let's go back.
Okay.
Item 6.3. So as you know, we have to formally accept donations that exceed $25,000. I believe last week we received a check in the amount of $266,000, which is represented in the fundraising number that's in the budget, that represents an aggregate of a number of donors, some of whom have asked to be anonymous. So we have to have a formal vote to accept that donation towards the high school fields project. I don't know if there's any discussion on that, or if someone wants to make a motion. That check came in last week, middle of the week?
It came in Friday.
Friday?
Yeah, Friday.
Friday.
Friday. We were aware it was going to be coming, and it was one check representing individual donations that had been made, and the check came from the sports partnership. That check comes here. We don't manage the fundraising, but it's our responsibility to take any checks that come here and take them downstairs to the treasurer's office, so that check has been deposited there. But because some of the individual amounts in that aggregate are in excess of $25,000, in fact, quite a bit in excess of $25,000, it would be, it's our policy that the school committee needs to vote to accept those gifts. So they are in the field fund, which is a consolidated gift
Yeah.
account in the treasurer's office. And so if you simply accept the aggregate of a number of checks totaling $266, I think you will meet the policy guidelines.
I move we accept donations from groups and private citizens in the aggregate amount of $266,000 to be used towards the cost of the high school fields project.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
There likely will be some others of these that will come along with more of the
Like-
dollars.
We will be pleased to accept all those that come along.
We will do that.
6.4, policy and guidelines for the establishment of maintenance of student activity accounts.
This has been one of the tasks on a long-term list of things that we needed to get to and didn't. We have had some policy language under 4.3.4 in our policy handbook, but it did not have a lot of detail, and it did not have written detailed procedures. We have procedures for how we manage those funds, and those are funds such as, at the elementary level, it might be money that might be collected by students, not PTO, but by, for student field trips, as one example. At the middle school, it could be the middle school activity fee. At the high school, it would be the various accounts that the different classes maintain, student council, other clubs and activities that do fundraising, and so on. And so there are very strict guidelines by which one has to administer, set up accounts and administer and get the money to the town treasurer's office and so on. And so this is a policy that would replace a policy there, and it has more detail, reflects the law, but in addition has a set of procedures. Now, typically, you do not need to vote on procedures, but we always bring procedures related to policy to you, so you should know all of the detail that's there. This, as you know, policy by our policy requires 2 meetings, one to hear it. First reading, we typically call that, and then the second meeting, we would ask you to take action. So in the time between now and our next meeting, if people read this over again and find some either editing suggestions or other suggestions of substance, it'd be important to get that information back to the policy committee. But the committee is recommending this particular policy.
And just so you know, because we had this question on the different amounts for the high school, about the increase, because, you know, end of the year graduation, typically the bank account is increased, the balance. But we did ask, why not just keep the account at 60,000 instead of 30 for the whole year? But I guess Paula felt very comfortable with
Well, I
having the
think
2 different
in terms of
amounts.
credibility and good financial management, you always want to have the least that you can
Right.
get by
Yeah.
with. And so certainly this time of year, when you have
Right.
expenses like the prom and all the different senior activities and the awards and all of those kinds of
Yearbooks
things,
and all of that, right?
you need to have
An
a
increased.
greater ability to write a check. So
Actually, I had a question. John, do you think this is enough for a maximum amount? Because if they're just for the example, if say the student council is selling a jacket that they want all their student council members to have, or they're offering to the school, and they collect all the money in for the jackets, and then, so the account goes up, and then they have to write the check for the actual expense, will that fluctuation be covered enough with this maximum?
Yeah,
amount?
Liza, that's a good point. I mean, $60,000, I mean, it's a lot of money, you know, I wouldn't want to carry that all the time. But I mean, this does allow the principals to ask for more if they anticipate a
Okay,
bigger need.
right,
So
okay.
I sort of discussed that back and forth with Paula, and 60,000 is, you know, they may go over, they may need more money, so, you know, in where it is from February to June 30th, hopefully that amount, because they can always refund it. So, see, the
Right.
process sets them up so they spend, and then they can submit receipts as quickly as they want and get refunded up to those levels.
I didn't
So-
want to preclude one organization from doing something because the bank account had maxed out.
Right,
And
yeah.
that's
Right.
all I was thinking.
Right.
But there
is
is
just to-
an appeal to you.
Yeah, so that's
for
good.
example.
As
There's an
long as
appeal,
there's
so if they had,
flexibility.
say, a one-time and they said, hey, listen, we're gonna need 80,000, they'd know that. And they
Okay.
would just come, you know, with a letter and appeal, and the committee could approve it. But in the, you know, the other ones, if they said all of a sudden they, you know, went with $30,000, there's nothing that prevents them from submitting a warrant
Okay.
so that we can check it off and we get that refunded right back up to the
Right.
$60,000 level. So they can increase their frequency of refundings.
Okay.
And then, you know, and then this will be the first year that we implement too, right? So should we find that the 60,000 turns out not to be enough, then we'll probably
Okay.
be here next year asking for an
Okay.
increase.
All right, so if everyone could just review that, and we'll vote on that the next time we meet.
Right.
6.5, we're not going to address tonight, we'll address at a future meeting. 6.6, Meeting dates in the summer.
Right, and typically, we've had 2 meetings, and it's unfortunate we have 2 people missing tonight,
I
so.
know.
I think that all we are probably going to be able to do is to suggest some tentative and then check in with our 2 absent members. But we typically have met twice during the summer, and these are the typical dates toward the end of July, because our next meeting is the last in the school year, which is June 17th, so this would be roughly a month from there. And then, given that the faculty work week begins on August 26th, we always try to have a meeting just prior to that to update you on where we are and if there are any areas of concern that we need to talk about and so on. So these are the dates that I would suggest. Obviously, these are for regularly scheduled meetings. It's clear from what's been happening, in the recent past, that it may be necessary to call some other meetings for a particular function, but these would be the regularly scheduled meetings. So these are the ones I would recommend. Obviously, the votes would be up to you, and our goal always in the summer is to get a quorum. We can't always guarantee that we'll have 7 people, but, so it would be important to check with the other 2 members.
So August 19th could possibly be a problem for me.
It's a problem for me.
It's a problem for you?
I won't, it is a problem for me.
Okay, I think we should change that date.
It's not for me.
Is the problem for the entire week, or is it just the day?
I'll be back probably Wednesday or Thursday
Yeah.
that week. But
Wednesday or Thursday might work better for me. I think I'm gonna be out of town that week.
Okay.
And my
Are you gone the whole
annual
week, or-
DC trip.
So how about the week? Ed said he's gone the whole week, so.
Well, you can't build around one person.
Well, I would suggest then that we would go
12th?
back to the 12th, only because that week of the 26th, when the faculty is
Yeah.
Yeah,
late.
too crazy.
If there were any actions that you might
Right.
need to take. So I would suggest then going back to
I'm free on the 12th.
12th is fine.
12th?
That whole week
I'm gone
at this
the
point
week.
is fine for me.
Whatever.
Well, maybe we should,
Well,
you know,
let's check
see what the other two.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's
not a
check
big
with the
deal.
other 2, and
Yeah.
then come back
Ray, what
and
about
see
you?
where we got the most.
The dates that are proposed here are both fine with me. I could also do the 12th.
Okay. All right, so we'll check and put it on the agenda again.
Okay.
The other thing I commented here is that last fall, we had a very successful planning session meeting. We had it on a Saturday, it was in September, and, one of the issues seemed to be that it was hard to find a date with all the fall sports and school activities getting started up, and so I'm just throwing out there, is summer a better time, assuming we could find a date, to have that kind of a meeting, when there may be less scheduled things going on, although we do have to contend with people traveling and so on. So
I mean,
that's just a question.
I would suggest that if we wanted to do it, and I think it was valuable last year,
great.
it would be better to have it in the summer. That Saturday was a challenge for me, personally.
And I think Andy, I remember, was also
Right.
Yeah.
good for.
And Paul, I think,
And Paul,
was
maybe.
Yeah.
had an issue that day as well.
Generally speaking, my preference would be to do it in the summer. I'm,
Kind of a problem in August, though.
I think the appeal of the Saturday was nothing else is going on, there aren't crises that are arising, get started early. The
Right.
other alternative that we've used for a meeting, and I have sent a note to Glenn Kuchar about a training kind of session, and that, in order to be able to get everybody here during the week, was like a 5 to 8 or 5 to
Right.
9 meeting. I think the morning thing is better, but I'm not sure how much ability we have to get everybody here in the morning.
Unfortunately for me, all 4 Saturdays in August, I've got something going on.
unless we did it, again, depending on other people's schedules, unless we did it a day, or a morning,
Like a
a weekday morning, that would.
I'm not sure that works for these guys, because.
Well, summer.
Oh, the summer, right, right,
Summer,
right,
yeah.
right.
Summer, it's
Right.
not nearly
Less of
as
an issue.
hectic here.
Okay.
Well, should we get everybody's schedules offline and then see where we mesh up and?
So there seems to be some good consensus, that would be a good thing to aim for, if we can
Yeah,
If we can
find a
work it
date.
out, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things is, it better syncs a little better with the budget. You know, it was kind of a crunch to get it in and get it done and the goals,
Yeah,
and then
right.
sync it in with the budget. So I think we did that earlier. It would be, it'd be useful.
Okay.
Well, I remember last year, it was originally scheduled on a Friday, and I have to fess up, I thought it was the silliest thing I'd ever heard. But then, since it couldn't be held on a Friday, it was held on Saturday. And I must admit that I thought it was a very valuable session.
Oh, I do too, I agree.
I thought you were saying it was done on a Friday, I mean, the session itself.
I think it was very worthwhile.
It was,
Yeah, it was.
absolutely.
It was
I'm glad we had it,
A very good idea, and I think.
that we had it on a day that, and if you remember, we had a lot of people from the AdCom here.
No,
No.
different session.
Different was,
We're talking about our strategic planning session.
Well, maybe I didn't even go to it.
everybody was
It was
there
September
except,
15th.
Right.
Andy had to leave early. He came and had to leave early, but everybody else was there. But you
And
are thinking.
what day of the week was it?
It was a
Saturday.
Saturday.
Okay.
Like at 8
September
o'clock?
15th.
It was 8 o'clock.
Yeah, 8 to 12-ish. And, but we also did have a Saturday session, which is what you're thinking about.
AdCom.
With AdCom. We've done that the
Well,
last
they
several
both
years.
were.
And that was equally valuable,
Yeah.
but later in the year.
I mean, I don't know if it's a good idea or not, but, you know, if we're gonna meet on, say, August 12th, if we wanted to try to do something, which means everybody perhaps would be around, either do it one morning that week.
Well,
or-
Liza's not here
I'm
that
not
week.
here
Oh, I'm sorry, you
She's
said there
not-
wasn't, I'm sorry.
Right.
So much for that idea.
Well,
Or
let's see.
even maybe later in that week, I don't know. Are you going that whole week?
That's the week we're gone.
Oh, that's week you're on. Okay, so maybe the week before.
Well, I thought it
Gone
was a
that
good
week.
session. I wouldn't
Or maybe in July.
do it again.
It's gonna be a challenge, unless we do it, maybe piggyback on to.
Yeah, and I
Lent.
think, I don't know, I can't speak for Andy or Paul, but I would suspect that,
September's not gonna.
at least for the three of us, doing a half-day during the week is gonna be a challenge.
Right.
If we're otherwise taking vacations different times.
So how about, is July as bad as August?
Not for me. July is much better.
Because, I mean, the week of the 15th or the week of the 22nd of July are both fine for me. I mean, it's not like something we have to do a lot of preparation,
No.
there's preparation to present, but, you know, it's mostly a brainstorming type of
But
thing.
are you talking about,
For the planning session.
yes, but are we talking about a weekday or a weekend, or what are we talking about?
I think if people can do it, I think it makes sense to do it in the morning during the week, but it's up.
I think what
Yeah.
Ray said, that's a problem.
Oh, in the summer.
Right, and I'm going away early in
Oh,
July,
okay.
so I couldn't come back from
Okay.
a vacation and then take a half-day
Right.
right on the heels
I
of
got
it. It
you.
would be
Okay.
challenging.
A Saturday, you'd have to do it on a Saturday.
Yeah,
Okay.
and a Saturday would be fine in the summer, for me.
In July.
As long as
July.
it's raining.
I'm actually doing the Lincoln Sailing Beginners thing. I decided I lived in Hingham this long, I should learn to sail, which is Saturday mornings, but that's okay. I would give up my
All
sailing.
right, should we wait until we have the other two and then we'll
Okay.
move on? What
All
else do
right.
we have?
Okay, 6-8 is enrollments, projections.
Yes, you have our first projections, well, actually, the very first projections came out of the meetings that Ellen and I had with the secondary principals and directors and with the elementary principals. So you should have a sheet that has two sides to it. And these projections for kindergarten reflect packets that have been returned. You know, all through the spring, we were assuming that if people took out a packet, they would return it. We get to a point where we've called and nagged and so on, and now know that some of those who picked up packets will not return them. So we have a total kindergarten enrollment of 286 students, and we have 256 in the May 1st count, so that's a significant increase in kindergarten students. And you can see all of the numbers, the average class size that would result there. You will remember that at the budget time, we added one elementary position in the budget that was ultimately approved. And I know in particular Ed was concerned about numbers, thinking, I think, mainly at the time, Ed, about first grade, right, at South. And actually, as we looked at all of the numbers, the place where we thought we most needed an additional section was at South, but in the second grade. So the one budgeted FTE was added there. However, given that we have 30 more students in kindergarten, we also believe that we need at least a half kindergarten. And so this projection reflects an additional half kindergarten, and that is at Plymouth River. And you may look at that number and say, well, gosh, same number of students roughly as at Foster. But remember that some of our kindergartens are integrated full-day kindergartens, and those classes, because of the number of special needs students that are in them, we try to keep smaller than the others. We try to have those be at a maximum of 18 students. So at Foster, we have 3 kindergartens and 65 youngsters, but at Plymouth River, if we had only 3 sections, and one of those is the extended day kindergarten with 8 or 9, I believe, children with IEPs in it, then those classes would all have to be at 22, and that's not a workable number. However, we are watching that Foster situation very carefully.
Yeah.
And should it increase, we might need to consider an additional section there. We do believe that since the time the budget was approved, we have continued to get some personnel changes, some additional retirements that were really unanticipated as late as 2 weeks ago, I believe. And as well, some additional folks who are either continuing with a second year of a leave that they started last year, or are taking a new full year leave. So we do think that we can fund this additional half kindergarten with savings from those retirements. But at this point, this projection includes an additional second grade class at South School and a kindergarten section at Plymouth River, and with watching the Foster situation pretty carefully. Other than that, the average class sizes, I think, while they're not all where we would like them to be, they're not at 26 and 27 as we had, and pretty good balance across the schools. This number is simply moving students along with additions that we know or knew as of the first part of May. So obviously, there likely will be additional ins and outs. And there isn't any assumption that there will be more coming in than going out, although that in fact could happen. We haven't yet added METCO students, but John and I have met with Alicia, and typically as kids move out of the program for one reason or another, they move out of Boston and aren't eligible, or they graduate, and we try to bring children in. And at this point, we've identified 2 grades at Foster and 1 at South, where we would be looking to bring in METCO students. And we have been under our quota for the last couple of years. This would not bring us to the quota, but it would replace students that have left the program, and so we're looking at a total of 6. So if you think of the 2027 and 6 more, that's 2033, and so not that far off
So
from where we are now.
So when you say we're under our quota for METCO, meaning the
40 students is typically what we've had, and our grant is based upon that assumption that we'd maintain something near that. It's not always possible if a student moves during the middle of the year. Or
But there are people that, it's not for lack of people interested in coming?
No.
Yeah.
They have a waiting list, and they're always happy to place students, so.
So Dot, if I look at this, so grade 1 has an increase of 39
Yeah,
students from the
and you
current
know,
kindergarten?
Yeah, that's a little deceiving, because if you look at the past several years, last year, we had an increase from the kindergarten to grade 1 of 67 students, I believe it was. So this looks like, well, gosh, that's gone down a lot. However, if you look at the pluses and minuses in each one of those columns, there's a total of 9 repeaters. So those kids didn't move up from kindergarten. And then there's a total of known leaving students of 3, 6, 7, 3, 5 is 8, and 2 is another 10 students that we know happen to be leaving Hingham, and therefore would not be in that number, so.
And that's a high number.
Yeah, it is a high number. You know, typically, we have a lot of consistency from one grade to another. When they arrive here at kindergarten or first grade, we tend to have them. So it is unusual to have both a number of retentions in kindergarten and a number of students leaving. And so that, you have to put that 39 increase in perspective.
But you also have an additional amount in kindergarten over this year's
Well, that is,
kindergarten. So I
yes.
think that, you know, that whole,
Yeah.
you know, path where we saw more kids coming in for first grade and less for kindergarten, maybe it's swinging.
Maybe changing, exactly. So we were just saying, maybe we have a pattern here with K to 1, and
Don't
now
say
we're
it
having to
out
look
loud.
at maybe a new pattern, that kindergarten is going to go up and the others go down. So there's always something to watch for, but anyway, I would send this along to you. The principals report it every 2 weeks, and I'll send it along to you. On the back, the best we can do at the secondary level is really to look at the number of students who have schedules. I think I've said many times before, at the secondary level, we don't always get the immediate information about who's going to be moving or entering or whatever. So this is mainly based upon the number of students who scheduled. Given that scheduling happened in March, that was before some of the students had been accepted at and agreed to attend some private schools between 8 and 9. So the 9th grade number does reflect an assumption that some students would be going to private school, as often happens at grade 9. And so 1,001, in the column furthest to the right, the size of the grade in 2012, 2013, that 975 is our current middle school enrollment. So that's up 26 youngsters, not unanticipated, but that's a crowded building for one more year and challenging use of space and so on. And the high school number is up about 30. But we say these are soft numbers. We'll continue to monitor them, but I think the elementary, we know a lot more about ins and outs than we do at the others. So
it looks like there's going to be a continuing significant increase at the high school level, right? If the cohorts move up from the
yeah,
middle
although
school.
not as big. For example, those 8th grade, 342, and you say, gosh, 342 are going to leave the middle school and go to the high school. We won't have 342 in next year's freshman class at the high school, because there's always a loss of some students who
BC
either go
High,
to a
Notre Dame.
vocational
Yeah,
school.
but there's only 265 there now, right? Isn't that what that projection for this year in 12?
Oh, in 12, yes.
Yeah, so there's
That's
265.
kind of the last smaller
Right, so there's
class.
265
Yes.
leaving, and even if it's.
Oh, it'll be
three-
an increase,
Oh, yeah.
yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, I see what your point
Right,
is.
yeah. And
Okay.
then, yeah.
Yeah, wait till grade 4 and 5 get in
Yeah, it used to be that we had that one big class moving through at the elementary level, and now, look, you have a class at grade 4, next year 381, and grade 5 at 383.
Yeah.
So those classes will be putting the new building at greater than the capacity for which it was built initially, which we anticipated
Yeah.
was going to happen.
Yeah, we knew that when we built it, what, 1020 was the number?
1020 is the number.
Right,
yeah.
but we expected it could go
And
up
we
to
expected
1060
that
or
would
something like that?
be the case.
11,
Oh, over 11
50.
at some point?
Yeah.
Great.
Okay. Third quarter financial update.
John's going to give you some verbal information. I would just remind you that back when we were working on the budget, particularly as we were looking at the capital budget, we initially proposed a budget of over $1 million, all things that we felt we could justify, but obviously all of the departments have requests of capital outlay committee, and they have only so much money to give away, and so we ended up with an approved capital budget of less than half of what the request was. And we talked at the time about the fact that if we make a request and it is not able to be funded for some very good reasons, then we might look at using any unexpended funds from the current year's budget to take some of those capital items off the table, not only for us, but for the town as a whole. And these are not things that would be new ideas, that we're just saying, well, gosh, if there are unexpended funds, let's look and find out what we'd like to do to spend money. These are things that were on the list that everybody felt were worthwhile expenditures and simply didn't make the cut because there were not enough dollars available. So John has put together a list, working with Paul, working off of that budget, capital budget from last fall, and he's going to share some of that with you.
Yeah, we'll just pass out this list. So, Jen, the FY13 budget, we're in very good shape with the budget. We have a positive variance. I don't have a total positive variance number yet, and the reason for that is because I have to look into special education expenditures a little bit more. I know they're going to be positive, and it'll be healthy positive, but I just couldn't get a comfort level with the numbers. However, this list, generally the budget will be positive. Back in February, I did report we had a balance of, a positive balance projected somewhere in the line of, $237,000. With that knowledge, I started taking some planning action to try to get a number of projects rolling, and then also in planning for the year end. With the positive balances that we may have, my planning ideas would be to preserve the field revolving account that we have, rather than make expenditures out of that account and use that balance, that we would preserve that so we can leave it available for, funding some elements of the field project. Currently that account has a balance of $135,000 in it today. So, that would be a reversed out transactions from this year to preserve that.
And remember that particular account will have a reduced capacity for new monies, because we're going to have fields that are out of commission.
Right, there'll be no
So we just
rental.
don't have as much to rent out over the next 2 years until the new fields grow in. So it's important if we can preserve that balance by not using the offset that we had planned to use. That would be a good thing.
And when we look at the regular accounts, generally on the budgets, since I don't have a total positive variance to provide to you today, generally salary accounts are in positive, and they're $20,000 to $30,000 positive. Utilities and gasoline, because I'm not planning to use offsets, are in negative of about $92,000. Special ed, I'm reworking the variance method that I use to take all of special ed transactions, because that's the way we're doing the budget now, as opposed to breaking them into personnel and breaking them into transportation.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another reason why I just don't have that number available. Then for contracts, we have contracts in negative about $25,000, and that's because in that number, in my forecast, I've included trying to replace the water-cooled, air-cooled, the water-cooled refrigeration units at the Foster and the PRS. Those were a couple of capital items that we had that we deferred to next year.
And they're energy saving.
Yeah,
In
there
the
will
end.
be energy saving, well, right. And then removing a propane tank at PRS. When the generator failed, the long-range planning committee suggested that we shouldn't replace the generators. As a result, since the tank will no longer be used, we should really pull that. The high school has some, and what we've done in the capital budgets was we've pushed all these into 2015 budget. And we know the likelihood of getting the money, it would just take from next year's budget. So I think that it's a good use of the funds to do it this year. Also, the concrete squares at the high school on the Pleasant Street entrance, lots of cracks and presents
More
really.
than cracks. I
Yeah, it's a
was
safety
there
hazard.
at graduation, and really, it's all eroded away. I've never
Yeah.
seen anything like it, honestly.
So, with that, we plan to use some money for the replacement of those squares. Then also, I did put the play shed out to, PRS play shed roof out to bid, to get solicit quotes. And I did get the quotes back, and they're like between $16,000 and $20,000, so I should be able to get that re-roofed. And so I plan to pull the trigger on that. The play shed at Foster is being evaluated.
What does that mean?
Evaluated means it's being measured, making sure that it's
Okay.
structurally stable. You know, what will it need to be completely stable? Can we hang new basketball hoops onto the
Okay.
structure? Okay,
There
so,
was some concern about the structural
Oh,
soundness of the basketball supports, so before going ahead and
Yeah.
repairing or replacing, wanted to make sure that
Good.
the structure itself was sound, or if it needed to be bolstered, or
yeah. And also because it's rusted and stuff, to have the integrity of the overall. You know, when you actually look at it a certain way, the engineer that was out there, he said, well, see, you can see it being like sort of twisted a little bit. So it might need a little stabilizing as well as, you know, painting and then talk to another person about the fiber panels. So that's sort of underway to try to get as much cost as we know about this project this month, so that I could pull a PO for it and try to get it done. Because we initially wanted to paint it, so we want to paint it, but we'll probably have to paint it and repair it. But we don't know the extent of the repairs until we evaluate it, so, you know, that's underway.
This is one of the
That would be
issues
great,
that-
that's long overdue.
Yeah. But one of the issues that we have is you can't wait until the budget year closes on June 30th.
Right.
And then say, oh, we have X dollars now, what can we do? Because so many of these projects require either bids or quotes or plans or engineering
complicated.
consults or those kinds of things, so.
but you could encumber money.
I could encumber
And-
money, yes.
In
That's,
capital.
and that's what this plan would be. And, you know, back in February, I did suggest that we should use this, and I think I brought it up again when I gave the facilities update, that, you know, if there's year-end money, because these projects take a couple of months to sort of
Right.
get the right person in place, try to get what the cost estimate is, and then actually get into a position where you have a firm bid and you can, you know, can encumber the money for its use.
So when we meet next time on the 17th, you'll have firm numbers, so we can get a precise sense of what we have to work with, and to the extent there might be anything else that we could.
Yeah, I certainly will be able to get to the bottom of the special ed thing. I mean, it will just be more positive, you know, that's one thing I know for sure. I just don't know really what that dollar value is right now. You know, come on the 17th, I'm not sure that there's a lot of stuff we could do with the money. So, I mean, we were preserving the field revolving, building revolving. I'd preserve some athletic revolving as well. And,
So, John, do you have an idea, like a ballpark or a range of what all of these total?
the ballpark for the preservation of these accounts, plus this is, you know, probably about $150,000,
For all these items?
yeah. Approximately.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, so on the 17th, I could have a better number, you know, I will be more comfortable to provide a number. As far as the, you know, action on what we could do with that number afterwards, it would be limited for time purposes, from a maintenance standpoint.
Are you looking for us to do anything with this list tonight?
Well, I think what we would like to know is if there are things on here that you say, you know, we've lost interest in doing this is not a priority, we'd want to know that. On the other hand, if there's thinking back to the capital planning, if there are things that you heard about at that time that aren't on this list, that would be important to see whether or not that's something.
I just have a
that-
question about the Pleasant Street entrance at the high school. Didn't we hear from a neighbor or a walker that had identified that as a problem or a safety issue?
That's actually by the field, Carol. That area, from the south parking lot coming up to the high school, there is a dip in there, and that is bad.
I know that. No, is this the actual sidewalk in front of the high
It's
school?
the actual
Yeah, the Pleasant Street
concrete
entrance, yes.
sidewalk at
But not
Pleasant
the
Street.
sidewalk that abuts the street. You're talking about by the entrance to
The
high
entrance
Right at the
doorway,
entrance,
the
yeah.
entrance doorway area,
It's
yes.
almost as if, I don't know,
It's
what could have
heaved.
been damaged by a plow or something.
You could
It's
get hit, and
really,
it could freeze, you know, water could get in there, frost heaves could develop, so. you know,
A
and
lot
so.
of people use that entrance in the morning.
Yes.
Yeah.
Um,
You know, and so the alternative would be asphalt or concrete squares, and I think the concrete squares would be a better face for the building. So that's why, you know, we're proposing to do the concrete squares. More expensive than asphalt, but
That's the look.
it's really
that's-
necessary, yeah.
It's more
Can I-
durable too, right, presumably?
Yeah, it should be.
Right.
Can I just call your attention to a couple other things? So, you know, other categories, we have a positive variance of about $51,000, and that's primarily last year, you know, the paper supplies. So I'm bringing the paper supplies down, and I'm only planning to purchase about 1,000 cases this year, which would be ample supplies for next year. So that was a savings of about $50,000. And then the last thing I wanted to call to your attention is last year's capital budget, we had $37,000 allocated in capital for window replacement and door replacements at Foster's. That project we did not do when we started getting into trying to design that. We came across some regulations that could potentially make the cost escalate way too high. So I made a decision that it was better to sort of wait for all of the windows and doors at Foster to be addressed, you know, with a MSBA project, rather than get into, you know, trying to replace one window and then getting into a bunch of areas that we don't want to get into.
Okay.
So wouldn't that
So we're gonna
money have to go
return that
back to the town?
Yeah, we'll return that 37 to the town and make capital aware of that.
I guess what I was getting at was, in 2 weeks, when you have a better sense of what's left in
Yep.
fiscal 13, maybe we could take a look at the capital budget again. And if there are some small items on there that we didn't get, that we might be able to pursue independently.
Yeah, the only trouble I have, Ray, is being able to have the manpower and to get the
understand.
project going, yeah.
Right. No, I
Sure, absolutely.
Something to possibly look at.
Well, the
Yeah.
other place we could look is not so much projects that require engineering and all of that, but look at some of the equipment kinds of items,
Right.
which would be, you know, easier to make a purchase of things that we had reduced from the budget, because we never fully fund the equipment,
Right.
the equipment line.
Yeah, I mean,
And it's one time, I mean, obviously, we're not going
Yeah.
to replace people with
I don't think we
one-time
anticipate the
money,
number of
but-
retirements and the savings that we've realized.
No,
from
although
that.
we are hoping, first of all, that it's going to pay for this kindergarten teacher.
exactly.
And we
Right,
also-
that's a 14 thing, right?
Right,
So-
and we also anticipate that we are going to be able to provide most of what we had to cut at the end of the process. So those plans are ongoing. And although the custodial position, what did we call it, wasn't,
Custodial supervisor, maintenance
Manager,
backup, or,
right.
yeah.
that wouldn't be something we would be doing immediately, later in the year, because there are some collective bargaining components that go with that, and so that wouldn't be need to be fully funded. That was the most expensive of the items on that list. So that's for the 14 budget. We think we're going to be in good shape. And again, because it's really an unprecedented number of retirements, resignations, leaves. I mean, I think that we're going to be hiring more than 30 individuals over the course of summer.
Be like last summer.
Yeah.
Last summer, yeah, it was like 26. And that's professional staff. That doesn't even begin to get into the paraprofessionals and the other support staff.
Thanks, John. Yes, Mary.
Sorry, I know it's late. Mary Power from the Advisory Committee. I was just wondering, is there any sort of a precedent? My understanding is that when there are monies left over at the end of the year, that there's a certain amount that can be encumbered, and sometimes we accelerate purchasing. But I'm just wondering, as a town, has it been our custom to purchase capital items that the Capital Outlay Committee didn't recommend? It's more of a question.
Typically, over the last several years anyway, we have returned money to the town. And if you go back enough years, before you were here, Mary, and not before I was here, but if you go back enough years, it used to be that money that was unexpended from all departments, went back to the town, and that pool of money, those dollars, were used for capital budget expenditures in the subsequent year.
Okay.
So that if we had $200,000 that we had not expended, we knew that it would go back to the town, and that the following year's capital budget allocation would be $200,000 richer. And therefore, that benefited all departments, really, because it didn't mean that we got back the 200,000, but there was more available money. And when that practice changed a number of years ago with the idea of funding a capital out as an operating item, which is the same year that we went to fully funding OPEB, when that change came along, it seemed that we were, in one year, returning unexpended dollars, and then in a subsequent year, having to ask for those dollars all over again.
Yeah.
And I think that it really was at the insistence, I guess, of some members of the school committee over the last several years, that when years that we were cutting and that we didn't get all of the things we needed in the operating or capital budget, that there was some unhappiness with returning money to the town that would simply fall to the bottom line and into the town's reserve. So I think there's been a lot of discussion recently about, what's the best way to handle that. And in particular, this year, as we were proceeding through the budget process, I think there was a lot of feeling that we put forth a very large number because we needed a lot of dollars. We were very understanding. There were only so many dollars to go around, and we got what was a fair share. But I think at the time, many people on the committee expressed the idea that if we have unexpended dollars, then we should look at using those at very least for some capital items.
I just make 2 points, and I realize it's late. The first one is that I think there are all of the other town departments. I think we got about $4.6 million in capital requests.
Sure.
And so I would imagine that other departments are in that place, and I think from an advisory perspective, we just want to make sure that those dollars would be treated in a consistent manner across the town. So we don't come to the end of the year and find the public safety department did one thing, the school department did something else. And I would just suggest that if we're deviating a little bit from a past practice, there might be an opportunity in the next couple weeks to talk about that a little bit. I would just also remind this committee, as we have with all the others, that on our forecast we have a line, Dennis knows it, it's called fund balance. And in order to maintain our fund balance percentage, and one of the reasons we haven't been able to return money for capital is because our fund balance was below our threshold. But this year, our budget is growing by $3 million, our bottom line. So we're going from $88 to $91 million. To just maintain our fund balance percentage, we count on between $350,000 and $400,000 falling into fund balance at the end of the budget year. And so this year, we budgeted 0 on that line for fund balance because in the last couple years, and as you guys know and have commented on, we've returned often in excess of that. Last year, I think we returned about $1 million. But I would just ask all the town departments to keep that in mind as well, because in order to just keep our fund balance, keep that emergency savings at the level we're at, we got to put a couple $100,000 in at the end of the year. Otherwise, we're going to need to budget for it in the operating budget, which puts further pressure. So just a couple things to throw out there.
And I don't
Thank
think
you.
anyone is suggesting that we look at the exact number of dollars that may be unexpended and say we should spend every penny of that.
Yeah,
Oh,
Yeah.
Not at all.
That's a good point.
thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
Well, I would say in light of what we wouldn't spend it all, I'd take priority of the things that really affect the kids. I mean, I would say the high school entrance, if, that needs to be repaired, the sheds, because, especially if the Foster shed, you can't, if there's structural concerns, you don't want to worry about that. And then Plymouth River, those are things that we want to make sure the kids are safe.
Right.
So to me, looking at those as, if we're going to start prioritizing, that's what I would prioritize a little.
Of course, the other part of that, the flip side of that is that replacing the water-cooled refrigeration units
Yeah.
pay for themselves.
Right,
I think
yeah.
we're doing all of these
Pretty
things.
Pretty
Yeah.
quickly, yeah.
I don't think we need to prioritize, we're
Yeah.
doing all of these things.
Right.
We're hoping to.
Okay, oh,
Yeah.
Yeah.
all right.
It all works within the positive budget right now.
Okay. Thank you, John. 6.10 is a resignation. Sue Dyrek, a long-time teacher. We wish her well in her retirement. 6, 11, and 12 are extended leaves of absence. We're replacing the entire 5th grade teaching team at East School, I believe, right?
Yeah, I hired a person this morning. Delightful. Yes, we are.
6, 13, 14, and 15 are appointments. Special education and library media specialists, welcome.
And I would note that where it says .5 library media at the high school, the actual additional position is a half position at the middle, so that they'd have a full-time librarian. But the person has been half-time middle and half-time high school. She will remain as a full-time person at the middle school, and so the filling of the position was high school.
Gotcha. Great, thank you. Anything in the last 2 days, other than what we've already talked about?
Well, a lot has happened in the last 2
Yeah.
days, but I think we've dealt with it.
Okay. Okay. I don't really have much of a building committee report at this point. We are meeting this Wednesday, our regular monthly meeting, so I might have something next time. Subcommittee reports, policy's been busy.
Policy met, and you've heard about
Yeah.
what we've been working on.
Salary negotiations did meet. Paul is not here. We'll talk about executive session.
Well, if you choose,
Shortly.
I mean, I think that anything that we could talk about in the open session, the fact that we have been working hard on the educator evaluation system with the working group, and the working group has come up with a recommendation to salary negotiations, and then there's a formal negotiation scheduled for Wednesday of this week. So we'll have some more word after that session occurs. And
Yeah, I don't think that we're going to, in this session coming up on the 5th, that we're going to be finalizing that. So there'll be an opportunity, I think, to have the executive session and to fill everybody. I think it would be better when Paul is here as well, and Andy, so that we can all participate and get up to speed on all of that. So maybe it would be better to put that off until the 17th.
Right, and, we're continuing to work away at those contracts that, individual contracts that we had not yet set salaries for, including some of the new folks. So we'd have that information too, but it's nothing that has to happen this evening.
Great. Superintendent's report.
Several good news things there. I just thought you'd like to be aware of Title IX now. We had a number of things on our list from the resolution agreement that we were to accomplish this year. One of them was a survey, and that has been completed. The results of the survey of girls in grades 8 through 11, or was it 12? 11, I think. To see what sports they might be interested in, we might be interested in adding, although we have just about all the sports that MIAA offers. But as with most things with the Office of Civil Rights, whatever we do needs to go to them to be reviewed. So we did the survey in a timely fashion and sent it off, and we haven't heard back on it yet. However, we hope that we will have some feedback. We also sent them some draft kind of language having to do with the policy that we're going to have to write regarding booster involvement and how booster funds are managed and that kind of thing. So Margaret sent some ideas off to see if we were going in the right direction. We are still waiting to hear from Office of Civil Rights on that as well. And what was the third thing? There was, no, can't remember the third thing. But there were 3 things pending at the Office of Civil Rights. So we're making progress to the extent that we can make it, but it's challenging to get a response. Almost anything that goes to the Boston office needs to go beyond that to whoever their higher ups are, and we tend to wait. So, meanwhile, life is going on well in the athletic department, and we're certainly not suffering because we're waiting, but it is frustrating that we had to write a resolution agreement that had all of these very firm dates, but we can't respond because we don't get information back. So, greenhouse, this is a really good news story. 2 years ago, in the fall, actually, 2 years ago in the fall, you had heard a report from Dana Crosby about the long-awaited greenhouse project and some ideas for locating that greenhouse near the section of the building that overlooks the athletic fields, the science entrance to the building as you face the building to the far left. We put that project out to bid. We had some fundraising, remember, that originally came from a competition that Dana and the students won.
National Geographic.
National Geographic, right, and then we had a very generous private donation as well, and some smaller donations. But the project came in, the bid came in,
$278,000.
right, and we had about
Story of our life.
80,000 at the time. And Dana had very strong ideas about where she wanted the building to be and what kinds of activities and so on, but our feeling has been all along that we can do something of a more modest nature and meet all of the goals that we have in terms of science instruction. And so a lot of thanks go to John, to Paul Field, and to Katie Roberts. Dana is on leave this year. She's in California. She's going to extend that leave next year. So when Dana comes back, we hope that we will have a greenhouse. It will be in a different location. It will be where the original greenhouse was, which is in the main courtyard that's off of the cafeteria. It'll be a more streamlined structure. And unlike the original plan, which was to build the greenhouse and then decide how we want to use it, Katie and John have gone off to see different plans, and it's really going to be around hydroponics, more so than, planting seedlings and so on, although that could be a piece of it.
Yeah, that is a piece. They will plant some seedlings,
Yeah.
but yeah.
In the outside bed. So we're really excited because the quotes have gone out,
Well, we put the bid
specs have
spec
gone
together, so we're piecing this together by buying a kit. Paul Field's done a lot, and then we'll bring a contractor in to do some site work to dig some sonotubes. This will be placed on sonotubes, and they'll dig down 4 to 6 inches and put some gravel and stone-based floor in there. We'll trench for electrical and for water and for a gas line. And we got, estimates from electricians, and we got less estimates on the foundation work and estimates for the kit, somewhere in around the tune of $32,000, and then someone to install it. So we think that we have a budget of about $82,000, and by piecing it together like this, we should be able to do the project within that amount. And then, with a basic set of equipment to start, and then over the years, we can continue to add to the operating budget to add additional equipment to it.
Yeah.
So,
it's exciting because
Great
it's been a long
news.
time in coming,
Yeah, it's a
and we
good
really
plan.
thought at one point we could never do it, but
I think the grant
So
was
June
applied for
13th.
4 years ago.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right, but 2 years ago, she came to 2 meetings in the fall, right, so.
June 13th, those bids open. We could open those bids, and I expect to have a kit, somewhere in the neighborhood between $30,000 and $40,000.
That's great.
It's awesome.
Lots of credit, and also Rick Swanson was involved.
Yeah,
heavily,
Ricky and Paula, yeah.
And Paula, and so a lot of work for the original $20,000 or $25,000 competition that we won. In the end, we'll have a greenhouse, so.
That'd be great.
The school, I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page with respect to school council reports. School councils are required to put together an improvement plan, a report, and typically they are due and need to be approved. At this point, approval by superintendent, early in ed reform, it was approval by school committee, then it changed to approval by superintendent. I think it's actually pending legislation that might give the approval back to school committee. But at the moment, they are approved by me. And as a courtesy, and because we think it's good practice for school committees to know what's going on in buildings and what priorities are, we have presented those reports. The problem is, if you, there are 6 of them. Quite honestly, I don't know what happens in districts that have 10 schools or 100 schools or whatever. But anyway, we've tended to present them in June and July and August. Technically, they're supposed to be approved by the end of June. And then last year, we ended up with having to do 3 at one meeting, 3 at another, and, you know, there isn't the time to give to the detail of them. So and it's really, logistically, doesn't make sense to say we'll do them earlier in the spring. Most of the school councils don't formally organize for the year until September. They have their first meeting in October. And so if they're going to work on the plan that they submitted the prior year and then come up with a new plan for the subsequent year, you have to give them 8 or 9 months. Typically, they meet once a month. So it just doesn't make any sense to say, well, just have them report in March or April or whatever. So anyway, the principals themselves came up with what I thought was a good plan, and we shared that with you folks many months ago, but because it's the time of year, the plan was that they would still submit them so that I could get them approved and meet the technical aspect of the law by the end of June, but that the discussion on their plans, both the ones that they've completed, things they've completed in the upcoming ones for the current year, would occur when we visit the individual schools in the fall. I think you're aware, Liza, that in the fall we go to each one of the schools and have a meeting there, and typically there's a piece of that time that we give to the school to talk about things. They seem to like that idea, at least when it was presented here before, around this table, it seemed to have consensus. So just letting you know, that's why you're not seeing school council plans on the agenda.
No, I think we all agreed it would be better if we,
We did.
yeah, last year it was 2 meetings in June, I think, we did 3.
3
And
and
3
yeah,
again, and it
right,
was,
yeah,
we
Too
thought
much,
that it
right.
was too much, and they got shortchanged.
right. So this way they can tailor their presentation around that. The last thing is a really, what I'm proud of, piece of good news, something we've been trying to get going for a long time, and really sorry that Andy's not here. I think he'd particularly like this, but we've often, we used to do alumni surveys, which only give you so much information, and you don't get a lot of good response, small percentages and so on. So I had been to a workshop about 4 years ago, learning about a new project. You've probably all heard about the National Clearinghouse, but this is one aspect of what National Clearinghouse does. And the project, at the time I heard about it, was getting high schools and colleges to buy in to share data about students so that one could look at what happens to students after they leave us. I mean, we give you a report about the graduating class every year and where they're intending to go and all of that kind of thing, but it's very hard to get information about what happens once they get there. So at the time I heard the presentation about this initiative, there were 2 concerns that everybody had. One was the initiative was just getting off the ground, and therefore they didn't have very many colleges in it. So if it doesn't represent a large number of colleges, then it's not useful information to us. The second thing is, how are we going to get all of our data? Because it wasn't just data from classes moving forward, but from past classes going back to 2004, 2005. And there wasn't a good answer at that point. Well, last fall I became aware that this initiative has grown tremendously, and 2 things have happened. One is they now have more than 3,700 colleges across the country that they have engaged in sharing data. And the second thing is that we can use our Naviance system that we have in the guidance office at the high school, and the data that's in that, and that can be transferred into this database, which solved a huge problem. And not only that, but the cost of doing that on an annual basis is an appallingly small number. And so we found out about this in the fall. We took steps to pay for the service and get our data all loaded up, and that was done about maybe March or so. And so we now can access that data. And I've hesitated mentioning it publicly because it's going to take many months for people like Heather, me, Ellen, excuse me, to get up to date on how to use this and all the many, many reports. And my feeling was, the minute I show you all this, there'll be a million questions. And,
Not this group.
and everybody will want to see it, and everybody will want to produce it, and we want to be able to digest it. But I'm just going to pass it along just so you can see the kinds of things that we can get. We can get data on an individual year of grad. We can get data on all of the students who graduated from '05 through last year, for example. There's an amazing amount of data and ability to generate reports, very detailed ones, and look at patterns and trends and so on. But there's still a lot that we just don't know about it, and we are going to be working over time, hopefully over the summer, to be able to use some of that information. I don't see us perhaps ever taking a whole packet like that and distributing it, but to use snippets of that information in other reports and sharing with the public and so on is something we plan to do. So it's something we're very proud of. There's a lot more to do on the project, but we're excited about that, and I wanted to mention it to you.
Got one question for you on that. So if a student is on Naviance and say they're looking at colleges or careers, would they have access to that database through Naviance?
At this
Do we
point,
know?
they don't. At this point, we get some things are available on Naviance in terms of kids' success rates at applying to a
Right.
certain college. That's already available. But there is a restricted access to this particular thing.
Okay.
It's called Tracker,
Okay.
the Naviance Tracker system. And at this point, no. Now, is there any merit? I think we'd want to look very carefully at what it is and how that might be
Sure.
useful to a student. Doesn't have student names, so
No, no,
it's
right.
not an issue of
It's more of a
confidentiality.
population.
But,
Just curious, I know kids,
What exactly is a Naviance tracker?
well, that Naviance Tracker
It's a
is the
software program?
it's a clearinghouse, it's a national clearinghouse that takes data from high schools. They take the data from all the high schools that subscribe, and the colleges are willing to share information by matching up student ID kinds of numbers. So the database of all the high school seniors isn't of any use itself, but when you can match it against the records of students enrolled in colleges, you can say, oh, well, there were 29 kids from Hingham who enrolled in whatever it was, UMass Amherst, for example. And the majority of those students graduated in 4 years. In fact, that's a very interesting piece of data. The number of students, percentage-wise, that graduate in 4 or less years is a pretty high number. Over a period of years. The data can vary a little bit each year. So it's really kind of like fingerprint matching, the kind of thing that the high schools provide the data, the colleges match it up, and good tool. Quite honestly, I thought we would never be able to do this because I pictured having to hand input all of the information about our students. And we just, we have limited resources, and that support kind of resources. We can use something that we already have, one database talking to another.
Right.
It's got a lot of potential.
Dot, do the colleges then look at this too and see like where reliable students coming from? You know, if we have a high percentage that graduate
That's a good question. I
college in
don't know
4 years,
how they use it, but
would
certainly.
they then look back and
Yeah,
say, oh,
that's-
Hingham
yeah.
gives us
Well, see,
good
those are
quality
some of the kinds of
students?
things that we want to look at what's available, ask questions about how we might use it. I mean, first blush, you say, well, we want to use it to say, we have a good product, and here's the proof. Kids
Yeah.
are being successful, and
Yeah.
they're not dropping out, and they're finishing, and some finishing in less than 4 years,
Yeah.
and that kind of thing. So that was the initial thinking about the value, but there may be other values as well.
Great. Well, thank you. So the executive session will defer till the 17th? Unless there's anything else, I take a motion to adjourn.
I mean, I hesitate singling out any group of students,
Mm.
and I was hoping that our student rep would have been here tonight, but congratulations to the girls' track team
Mm.
for winning a state championship. And a congratulations to the 5 graduates who, as I understand it, received their diplomas in the parking lot.
They did.
Yeah.
Miss graduation,
Yeah, you know, and graduation was terrific.
It was.
And it's always, the state meet is always the same day, and it's always a shame that they have to miss it.
Coach Stewart told me he was going to try
Yeah.
to see what they could do to change that.
Well,
Yeah, every year it's a few, it's 5 this year.
It's a lot this year.
And they tend also always to be very strong students
Right,
and who
right.
ought to be there getting recognition, and they have to make that choice, and it is a choice.
And particularly this year, graduation was very entertaining this year.
Awesome.
And also congratulations, you mentioned the state championship, we have the girls' crew
Nationals.
with a national.
Yep.
Nationals.
Going to Tennessee for a national.
Right. Had a really big year with sports.
It really was.
A lot of things, but sports,
Indeed.
yeah, been great.
Right.
Anything else?
Move we adjourn?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 10:28. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.